Chapter 2888. Although he had told Jin Hong that something major would happen to the Dark Star race soon and told Jin Hong to tell He Chan to leave the Dark Star race, it was only a matter of time before Jin Hong left. However, who was he back then? He was nothing more than a loose cultivator without any background. Furthermore, it was his first time entering the Dark Star realm. For him to think that he would be able to make these heavenly prides from the peak powers leave this place with a single sentence, it was clearly a fantasy. Jin Hong had left because he had obtained a droplet of essence blood from him. Refining the essence blood was clearly much more important to him than the spoils of the Dark Star clan. As for He Chan, why would she leave because of something so insignificant? It looks like I need to think of a way to force her to leave. And Hao Jia, one of their ancestors, is a divine general of the heavenly palace of Bixing. He's closely connected to Ming Dong's identity. I need to get them to leave as well, Jianchen thought, but he remained calm on the surface. The mess in the divine hall was cleaned up very soon, and new tables and chairs were set up. However, the tables this time were very different from the previous ones. There were primary and secondary seats. Jianchen and Bing Yuan were invited to the primary seats politely, while the several dozen prodigies from the various organizations sat in secondary seats. Esteemed Hall Master, may I ask if the God-tier heavenly resource that our Heavenly Thunder Clan has offered is satisfactory? Lei Jun asked rather eagerly as soon as he sat down. His eyes were filled with hope and eagerness. They all understood that the Fifth Hall's protection was only temporary. It was to give them some time to prepare the items that the Fifth Hall needed. However, this temporary protection could disappear at any time. Only when the Hall Master of the Fifth Hall personally agreed to it could they truly be at ease. When Lei Jun asked that question, all the geniuses in the Pantheon Divine Hall became uneasy. The leader of the Fifth Hall had actually come to the Pantheon Divine Hall in person. This was unprecedented. They all worried that this was the final deadline the Fifth Hall had given them. Some of the heavenly talents had even accepted their fate. They were ready to leave the realm of the fallen beast and give up everything they had built here. There were also a small number of forces who had made up their minds to temporarily submit to the Heavenly Thunder Clan. As for the 7th and 6th Hall's offer of 10 billion supreme-grade divine crystals to protect them for 100 years, they didn't even consider it. Most of the clans could take out 10 billion supreme-grade divine crystals. If it was used to trade for the precious materials of the Dark Star clan, they would agree without any hesitation. However, it was not worth it to buy 100 years of peace. Jianchen sat on the main seat and did not say anything. The geniuses in the Hall of Gods did not say anything either. They all looked at Jianchen with unease and unwillingness. Jianchen's silence caused Lei Jun's heart to suddenly become uneasy. He, who was originally full of confidence, suddenly became somewhat nervous at this moment. Could it be that the scarlet glazed fruit that our family offered did not satisfy the Fifth Hall Master? But this scarlet glazed fruit is a true divine treasure of heaven and earth, Lei Jun thought to himself. Lei Jun thought in his heart as a thin layer of sweat appeared on his forehead. The cold and indifferent attitude of the Fifth Palace Master had caused him to feel uneasy. At this moment, several divine king realm men of sacrifice escorted an exquisite white jade box into the Hall of Gods. They personally handed the white jade box to the Jade Pill Sex genius. The Jade Pill Sex genius was overjoyed. He took the white jade box with both hands and was so excited that his body was trembling a little. He said to Jianchen, who was sitting on the main seat, "Honorable Hall Master, fortunately we did not disappoint you. Our Jade Pill Sex ancestor has personally done it and successfully refined the divine pills that you need. Please take a look." As he spoke, the Jade Pill Sex genius opened the white jade box. Immediately, colorful light filled the air and the fragrance of pills filled the air. Inside the jade box, there were 7 pills of different colors lying quietly. As for the grade of this pill, everyone could tell at a glance that it wasn't at the divine tier. It was still a step away from the divine tier. However, with the example of the crimson glazed fruit, the sky prides in the pantheon no longer dared to underestimate this elixir. They all held their breaths and waited quietly, looking forward to what kind of changes would happen to these 7 elixirs. After all, these were pills that the ancestor of the Jade Pill sect had personally refined. Everyone believed that they were definitely not as simple as they seemed. At this moment, the 7 pills in the jade box floated up by themselves. Every single pill shone with a different, dazzling light. Their fragrance permeated the entire Hall of Gods. After that, under everyone's gazes, the 7 medicinal pills actually began to fuse together in the air. Moreover, a formation also appeared on the jade box that contained the medicinal pills. It absorbed the energy of the world and transformed it into flames as it carried out the final refinement of the medicinal pills that were fusing together. All of this was the handiwork of the Grand Prime of the Jade Pill sect. When the jade box was opened, the pills underwent a final transformation according to what the ancestor of the Jade Pill sect had set up in the outside world. This step seemed simple, but it was extremely difficult to achieve. It required great mastery over the way of pills. Around 15 minutes later, the pills finally completed their final transformation. The 7 pills had truly fused into one. Its size remained the same, but the quality of the pill was truly God tier. Leader, this pill was personally created by the ancestor of our Jade Pill sect. It's a wondrous pill that has never appeared in the current Saints world. I represent the Jade Pill sect and offer this pill to you. I hope you'll be satisfied. The prodigy of the Jade Pill sect was in high spirits. He smiled confidently as he personally offered the pill to Jianqin. Jianqin accepted the pill and immediately sensed its extraordinariness. Its effects were several times more powerful than the scarlet, glazed fruit at the very least. This was because his soul had been stimulated just from coming into close contact with the pill. This allowed him to conclude that not only did the pill have wondrous effects on healing the soul, but it could also greatly increase the strength of the soul. There's a hint of the presence of pure soul. Jianqin's heart skipped a beat. He slowly stowed the pill away and smiled in satisfaction. He said, "Not bad. I'm extremely satisfied with this pill from your Jade Pill sect. From today onwards, the Jade Pill sect will be under my protection. As long as I exist, the Jade Pill sect will exist." The prodigy of the Jade Pill sect was overjoyed when he heard that. He was so excited that he almost dropped to his knees. The other prodigies in the Divine Hall were shocked as well. They all became envious. They knew how precious the promise of the 5th Hall Master was. As long as the 5th Hall Master was around, the Jade Pill sect would exist. This was simply providing a permanent protective umbrella for the Jade Pill sect. It would allow the Jade Pill sect to be unafraid of any threats in the territory of the Darkstar race for a very long time. This was because the person standing behind the Jade Pill sect was a Hall Master, and an extremely powerful one at that. I didn't expect the Jade Pill sect to be permanently protected by the 5th Divine Hall. Unless the 5th Hall Master dies, the Jade Pill sect's position in the Darkstar race will be unshakable. Sigh. In the Divine Hall, many prodigies shook their heads and sighed. While they were envious of the Jade Pill sect, they also felt disappointed about their future. Honorable Hall Master, what about the Heavenly Thunder clan? We offered the scarlet, glazed fruit to the Hall Master. It's also of the divine level. Seeing that the Jade Pill sect had received such great benefits, Lei Jun of the Heavenly Thunder clan couldn't sit still and spoke anxiously. Jianqin took out the scarlet, glazed fruit and threw it to Lei Jun. He said, "Although this scarlet, glazed fruit is of the divine level, it doesn't meet my requirements. It's not qualified." Lei Jun was dumbfounded. He held the scarlet, glazed fruit with both hands and fell into a daze. His face also turned pale. Chapter 2889. Jianshin's words reignited a sliver of hope in Lei Jun's gloomy eyes. However, he immediately became troubled when he heard Jianshin's request. Hall Master, you may not know this, but the jade stone used to nurture the scarlet glass fruit is extremely precious. Even our Heavenly Thunder tribe doesn't possess such jade stone. The 3 jade stones we're using this time were all given to us by a terrifying organization that's countless times more powerful than our Heavenly Thunder tribe. Moreover, there are only 3 jade stones. Our Heavenly Thunder tribe won't be able to produce a 4th. Lei Jun said bitterly. Jianshin sat leisurely in the main seat. He tapped his finger on the table rhythmically and said calmly, "If you can't produce it, then I can't guarantee that your Heavenly Thunder tribe will be able to stay in the Dark Star territory. I'll give you half a month's time. Get your clan to provide me with 30 of those jade stones." 30. Lei Jun's eyes were wide open, and he was quite shocked. Although he did not know how precious the jade that contained the Law of Time was, even the Heavenly Thunder clan did not have such a thing. So it was not difficult to guess its value and rarity. In his opinion, it would be good enough if he could produce 3 of such precious and rare jade stones. He did not even dare to think about producing 30 of them. That's right. If you can produce 30 jade stones, not only will I protect your Heavenly Thunder tribe, but I'll also give your Heavenly Thunder tribe an extra tale of ancestral sacred land, said Jianshin. Lei Jun finally felt a little comforted when he heard the mention of ancestral sacred land. Then I'll send a message to my clan and inform them of your request. With that, Lei Jun left the Pantheon Palace. He no longer cared about what would happen in the Pantheon Palace. He was in an extremely bad mood after falling from heaven to hell. Many of the geniuses in the Pantheon Palace gloated when they saw the Heavenly Thunder tribe suffer. Last time, when Lei Jun took out the scarlet glazed fruit, he was extremely arrogant and showed off his ambition to make everyone submit to the Heavenly Thunder clan. This made many people dissatisfied with him. Now that Lei Jun had seen his greatest reliance on the Dark Star race, the scarlet glass fruit, thrown back without hesitation by the 5th Hall Master, who had even made an even more difficult request, Lei Jun instantly fell from heaven to hell. Such an outcome caused everyone to feel extremely satisfied and carefree. Their expressions were filled with schadenfreude. In the end, Jianshin's gaze landed on the dozens of supreme talents in the Pantheon Divine Palace and said, "Is there anyone among you who can take out something that meets my requirements?" Many supreme talents were silent. No one spoke. They had already received news from their clans that they could not bring god-level treasures of heaven and earth into the Dark Star realm. After a moment of silence, one of the supreme talents stood up and cupped his fists at Jianshin. "Lord Hall Master, although we can't take out god-level treasures of heaven and earth, we can provide other kinds of cultivation resources for the 5th Hall. After all, every year, the Dark Star race needs to exchange a large amount of cultivation resources from us. We're willing to make up for it with these things. Please give us a chance, Lord Hall Master." "Oh, I see." Jianshin showed a hint of hesitation and said reluctantly, "Since I have this pill from the Jade Pill sect, then my desire for god-level treasures of heaven and earth is not so strong. In that case, I'll give you a chance." When they heard that, the supreme talents gathered in the Pantheon Divine Palace immediately became overjoyed. As for the supreme talent from the Jade Pill sect, his face immediately became the color of a pig's liver. It was as ugly as it could get. Before they could say anything, Jianshin continued, "It just so happens that my race needs a large amount of divine crystals right now. How about this? As long as each of you take out some divine crystals, I'll promise to protect you in the Dark Star race. Don't put on such sad faces. I know how the 7th Hall and 6th Hall threatened you in the past. I'm not that kind of person. I definitely won't do something so overboard." When they heard that, the supreme talent's expressions improved slightly. They really were afraid that the fifth hall would be like the seventh hall and demand an exorbitant price of 10 billion supreme, grade, divine crystals for 100 years of peace. Then how many divine crystals do you need from us, Lord Hall Master? A supreme talent asked carefully. 2 billion supreme, grade divine crystals can get you 100 years of protection from me. 5 billion supreme, grade divine crystals can get you 500 years of protection from me. How about it? Isn't this price much better than what the seventh hall offered? Jianchen looked at everyone with a smile. 5 billion supreme grade divine crystals for 500 years of peace is equivalent to 1 billion supreme grade divine crystals for 100 years. It's equivalent to 1/10 of what the seventh hall offered. In the Pantheon Divine Palace, many supreme talents secretly heaved a sigh of relief. 1 billion supreme grade divine crystals for 100 years of peace. With the seventh hall raising the price before them, the supreme talents found it easier to accept this price. Lord Hall Master, you can't do this. You absolutely can't do this. When the supreme talent from the Jade Pill sect heard that the other forces could obtain protection by paying only supreme grade divine crystals, he immediately panicked. With an anxious expression, he said, Lord Hall Master's protection is so honorable and glorious. Such glory can only be enjoyed by offering up rare items in the Dark Star race. How can we use something as cheap as supreme grade divine crystals to obtain Lord Hall Master's glory? Please retract your order, Lord Hall Master. Jianchen's expression darkened slightly. He glanced over coldly and said in a cold voice, Is the Jade Pill sect trying to order me around? The supreme talent from the Jade Pill sect had a terrible expression on his face, as if his parents had died. Their Jade Pill sect's ancestor had personally gone out and spent a lot of effort to refine this unprecedented magical pill. Only then did they obtain the protection of the fifth divine palace. In the end, the others only needed to spend some divine crystals to obtain the same treatment as the Jade Pill sect. This naturally made the supreme talent from the Jade Pill sect very unwilling. This was because in this way, the Jade Pill sect's grand wish to dominate the 100 holy cities and obtain the greatest benefits would be in vain. However, in the face of the angry fifth hall master, the supreme talent from the Jade Pill sect did not dare to say anything. He immediately lowered his head and admitted his mistake. Lord Hall Master, you've misunderstood. Our Jade Pill sect wouldn't dare to be so bold. Then shut your mouth obediently. Jianchen was not polite to the supreme talent from the Jade Pill sect. He then said to the many supreme talents in the Temple of the Gods, Remember, there are only 50 spots for you to obtain my protection with divine crystals. Among you, I will only protect 50 families and forces. As for those forces who have been protected by me, don't think of incorporating other families and forces to indirectly obtain my protection. I'm not as stupid as you think. If you really dare to do so, you'd better think clearly about the consequences of fooling me. Everyone looked at each other when they heard that. At that moment, there were 80 or 90 organizations gathered in the Pantheon, but there were only 50 spots. Didn't that mean that less than half of them did not have any backing? In the current bad situation where the seventh hall was eager to kill them, having no backing meant that they had to give up their foundation here. However, more people were looking at the elite of the Jade Alchemy sect with gloating looks on their faces. Lord Hall Master, the Heavenly Thunder Clan is willing to pay divine crystals. At this moment, Lei Jun, who had received the news, returned and ran in from outside in a hurry. The Heavenly Thunder Clan is only allowed to take out 30 jade stones that contain the law of time. Otherwise, you can forget about existing in the Dark Star tribe. Jianchen's words immediately made Lei Jun's fiery heart turn cold. Chapter 2890. 3 days? How come there were only 3 days? That's far too short. The hearts of all the prodigies in the Divine Hall clenched when they heard the fifth Hall Master's time limit. This was a few billion supreme, grade, divine crystals, not a few 100,000 or a few million. They could only move such a tremendous amount of divine crystals from their clans. However, this was the Dark Star world, not the Saints' world. They had only arrived at the ruins of the Spirits' world after leaving this place. There was still a great distance between the ruins and the Saints' world. 3 days was far too short. Quick, quick, quick. Immediately send someone to pass on the news to the great elder guarding outside as quickly as possible. In the next moment, a prodigy called out and sent someone to pass on the news in a hurry. They really were racing against time. This was the case for everyone. That was because the Dark Star Realm was a place that possessed enormous benefits to all of their clans. Furthermore, some of the benefits were irreplaceable. It could be said without the slightest bit of exaggeration that the Dark Star Realm was the only place in all of the known worlds. As a result, all the prodigies were extremely devoted to their duties to protect the benefits of their clans. Very soon, the Divine Hall was empty. Only the prodigies of the Jade Pill sect and a few of their followers remained. The prodigy of the Jade Pill sect had a terrifyingly sunken face. His eyes were filled with gloom as his reluctance to accept this was as deep as the ocean. The prodigy of the Jade Pill sect was not the only one who felt this way. Lei Jun of the Heavenly Thunder Clan was also sulking in a divine hall that belonged to the Heavenly Thunder Clan. He felt indignant. Why? Why do the other clans only need divine crystals, but our Heavenly Thunder Clan has to provide something that even our clan doesn't have? You can tell with a single glance that it's extremely rare. This isn't fair, this isn't fair. Lei Jun paced back and forth in the divine hall of the Heavenly Thunder Clan. He was extremely irritated. The fifth Hall Master is simply going too far. At worst, our Sky Thunder Clan will no longer rely on the fifth Hall. Isn't the Dark Star Clan lacking divine crystals right now? If they really provoke us, our Sky Thunder Clan will use divine crystals to befriend the first divine hall. I don't believe that the fifth hall and the seventh hall will dare to touch a hair of our Sky Thunder Clan with the protection of the first divine hall, Lei Jun said exasperatedly. Young Master, be careful with your words. The fifth Hall Master probably hasn't gone far yet. If he hears what you just said, our Sky Thunder Clan can forget about staying in the Dark Star race. An old man who looked like a steward standing nearby changed his expression and immediately reminded him with a face full of fear. Young Master, have you thought about it? Even if we want to make friends with the First Palace, we don't have the means to do so. The 10 great sacred halls of the Dark Star race have always been existences that we find difficult to reach. This is because they look down on us. If it weren't for the fact that we can bring them some resources that can only be found in the Saints' world and provide them with an endless supply of life-devouring beast corpses, they probably wouldn't have allowed us to continue existing in the Dark Star world. Moreover, we don't know much about the personality of the first Hall Master. However, the fifth Hall Master is different. At the very least, from the conflicts between the fifth Hall Master, the seventh Hall Master, and the sixth Hall Master, we can tell with a single glance that the fifth Hall Master has always been partial to our 100 Saints city. As a result, I believe that the fifth Hall Master is more trustworthy. Lei Jun gradually calmed down after hearing the old man's explanation. The old man paused before continuing. I wonder if young Master has thought of something else. Although the fifth Hall Master wants our Sky Thunder Clan to provide things that are far more valuable than the other clans, the fifth Hall Master wants our Sky Thunder Clan to provide things that are far more valuable than the other clans. However, if our Sky Thunder Clan can provide 30 crystals that contain the laws of time, we will be able to obtain the fifth Hall Master's eternal protection. It can be said that from then on, as long as we don't provoke the 10 great sacred halls in the territory of the Dark Star race, we won't have to worry at all. We won't have to live our lives in fear like before. We won't have to act carefully. As for the other organizations that use divine crystals to obtain protection, there's a time limit. Right now, the Dark Star race is in dire need of divine crystals, which is why they can use divine crystals to obtain temporary peace. However, once the Dark Star race passes the critical period where they lack divine crystals, the Fifth Hall Master can abandon them at any time. Late June was enlightened by the old man's words. His unhappiness vanished completely. He chuckled aloud, that's right. Although the Dark Star race needed divine crystals in the past, it was nowhere near as great as it has been recently. Once this period of time passes, the Dark Star race's purchase of divine crystals will naturally return to normal. At that time, even if they beg the Dark Star race to accept them with 10 billion supreme grade divine crystals, they probably won't accept them. That's because the amount of divine crystals the Dark Star race consumes is nothing compared to our saints' world. Even if we give them several billion supreme grade divine crystals, they won't be able to use it all. As time goes on, the divine crystals will just drain away for nothing. At that time, without the powerful protection of the Fifth Hall, I'd like to see how they deal with the hatred and fury of the Seventh Hall. However, it's different for our Sky Thunder clan. Although it seems like we've suffered a loss right now, in the long run, we'll be able to avoid future problems forever. Late June changed the topic. He said to the old man sternly, "Elder Shu, I'll have to trouble you to make a personal trip and pass on the Fifth Hall Master's message to the clan. Afterwards, it'll all depend on whether the clan can provide 30 similar jades." For a moment, the tunnel between the two worlds was filled with people. People entered and exited frequently as they passed on information. What? The Dark Star race dares to charge us for protection? How dare they? How dare they? A mere clan that doesn't even have a chaotic prime dares to blackmail us. A peak clan. Very soon, the news from the 100 Saint City reached the Dark Star City in the ruins of the Spirit's world. The great elders of many peak organizations personally watched over Dark Star City. They were all chaotic primes. When these utmost exalted elders with high status in their respective clans heard the news from the Dark Star realm, they were all greatly enraged. 2 billion supreme grade divine crystals for 100 years and 5 billion supreme grade divine crystals for 500 years. This was basically extortion. It was extortion from peak organizations that stood at the apex of the Saints' world. Just think about how powerful their clans were, yet they were being forcefully charged for protection by a small clan that did not even have a chaotic prime. This was the first time they had seen something as absurd as this after living for countless years. Some of them were utterly furious. Anger surged from them, while some of them were angered by the extortion of a small clan like the Dark Star race. What do we do? What are we supposed to do against the Dark Star race's extortion? Are we supposed to reach a compromise with the Dark Star race, even though we stand at the apex of the world? Sai, what else can we do? The entrance to the world of the fallen beast is restricted, so we can't enter at all. As a result, we can't do anything to the Dark Star race at all. The Dark Star race also has benefits that we can't bear to part with, so what else can we do apart from reaching a compromise? 5 billion supreme grade divine crystals for 500 years of peace. That's 1 billion supreme grade divine crystals for 100 years on average. Give it. What else can we do? Yeah, 1 billion supreme grade divine crystals for 100 years. Compared to what we've obtained in the Dark Star world, it's just a drop in the ocean. After all, divine crystals are renewable in our Saints' world. They'll form endlessly, while the rare materials in the Dark Star world are unique. We can't miss out on them. But isn't the time too tight? They're only giving us 3 days. 5 billion supreme grade divine crystals isn't a small sum. I'll have to get it for my family, but the journey to and fro will take more than 3 days. Whatever. It's already too late to return to the clan. Let's borrow some from other organizations. It seems like there are only 50 spots. Oh, I need to gather 5 billion supreme grade divine crystals as soon as possible. As a result, in the following period of time, the great elders of many large organizations moved out personally. They either accepted or traded with the various organizations on the Darkstar continent. They began to gather divine crystals on a large scale. As a result, basically all the divine crystals from the various organizations on the Darkstar continent ended up in their pockets in a short amount of time. In the end, the Darkstar continent fell into an extreme shortage of divine crystals. Many cultivators did not even have enough for themselves. Chapter 2891. Jianchen, who was in the Darkstar world, naturally had no idea that the chaotic primes in the ruins of the Spirit Sage's world would personally rush about to collect the divine crystals. He was currently on his way back to the 5th Divine Hall. Leader, I'm really curious. Are the jades with the laws of time really that important to you? You've actually gotten the leader to give up the scarlet, glazed fruit in exchange for them. Bingyuan, who followed beside Jianchen, was unable to hide his doubts in the end. He asked. At the same time, a sliver of worry appeared on his face. He continued, and Si Wuqing. He's a vice leader of one of the 10 divine halls. The leader has humiliated him in the 100 Saint City, so the 6th divine hall probably won't just let this matter slide. The 6th divine hall is much more powerful than our 5th divine hall. As a matter of fact, even the 7th divine hall is slightly weaker than the 6th divine hall. It's said that the leader of the 6th divine hall, Owen, has already reached the peak of the 6th heavenly layer of infinite prime. He has spent most of his time in seclusion in order to break through to the 7th heavenly layer. Owen's strength is definitely greater than the leader of the 7th divine hall, Jia Di. Bingyuan became worried as soon as he thought about the strength of the 6th divine hall. In our alliance, only the leader of the 2nd hall, Anna, can contend against Owen. Moreover, putting aside the 6th hall master Owen, among the 3 6th hall vice hall masters, only Si Wuqing is at the 4th heavenly layer. His brother, Si Wuming, is also at the 4th heavenly layer. With the current strength of our 5th hall, it is absolutely impossible for us to defeat such a force. Jianchen flew in the sky with his hands behind his back. He said indifferently, "You don't have to worry. I obtained some power that might have been left behind by an astral beast in the Two-World Mountain. Although it's not enough to break through to the 7th heavenly layer, there's no need for me to fear Owen at the 6th heavenly layer. As for the jades with the laws of time, I have other uses for them." The teleportation formation in the 5th divine hall that hovered in the imperial capital of the Darkstar clan flashed. With the power of teleportation, Jianchen and Bingyuan appeared. "Greetings, leader. Greetings, vice leaders." The divine king of the Darkstar who guarded the teleportation formation immediately became polite when he saw the people who had appeared. He bowed politely. Ignoring the god kings guarding the teleportation formation, Jianchen stepped out of the teleportation formation. However, the moment he stepped out, his face suddenly changed. He glanced past the divine halls and the surroundings casually, and his lips curled into a faint sneer. However, at this moment, from the direction of the 6th hall, an enormous aura suddenly burst out like a volcanic eruption. It was as if a high and mighty king was pressing down on the 5th hall from all directions. Suddenly, the originally calm sky was suddenly filled with a violent wind. The thick layers of clouds that had accumulated in the sky were crushed by this huge aura. Even the floating 5th divine palace trembled slightly under the influence of this aura, swaying slightly in the air. "Kun Tian, you finally returned. I've been waiting for you for a long time." A furious roar rang out from the 6th divine hall. The leader of the 6th divine hall, Owen, suddenly flew out of the divine hall. He moved extremely quickly, radiating with Bingyuan's presence. He arrived in the huge square of the 5th divine hall in an instant and stared at Jianchen coldly. The 3 vice leaders of the 6th divine hall followed closely behind him. They also arrived in the square of the 5th divine hall and stood side by side with Owen. Si Wuqing's injuries had not recovered by much. He had only repaired a few important parts of his body, allowing him to maintain a standing posture. Perhaps it was to be kept as evidence, but the injuries on his face remained the same. Both of his faces had been smashed, and there were even cracks on his head. It was a shocking sight, as the deputy palace master, Si Wuqing, was also a reputable figure. Being forced to maintain such an appearance in front of everyone caused him to feel extremely tormented and humiliated. However, for the sake of revenge, for the sake of making the fifth divine hall pay the price for his actions, and for the sake of gaining more sympathy, he knew that he had to do this. Fifth divine hall master, you've gone too far. Even if my younger brother is at fault, you shouldn't humiliate him like this. Si Wuqing's brother, Si Wuming, said coldly with a darkened face. There was no respect in his voice at all. Instead, he seemed to be condemning Si Wuqing. With the arrival of the sixth divine hall, tremendous presences radiated from the third divine hall. Fourth divine hall, seventh divine hall, and ninth divine hall masters appeared at almost the same time. They stepped through the air and arrived in the fifth divine hall with a single step, gathering with the sixth divine hall master. Kuan Tian, you've gone a little too far this time. The leader of the seventh divine hall was the first to speak. Cold light flickered through his eyes. Don't hit people in the face. Si Wuqing is a vice leader after all. If he shows any disrespect, it's not unacceptable to teach him a lesson. However, to humiliate him like this... Sai, Kuan Tian, you've gone a little too far, said the leader of the ninth divine hall. He was a fifth heavenly layer infinite prime. The leader of the fourth divine hall said emotionlessly, Kuan Tian, even if you obtain the memories of the star beast that can harvest the divine king's grass in Two-World Mountain, and it's extremely likely that you'll make great contributions to our race in the future, that's not enough reason for you to act so recklessly. What are you doing? The 5 leaders have actually gathered in the 5th divine hall. Do you think that without Sunran, our 4 divine halls can be bullied? At this moment, a voice rang out. The leader of the 10th divine hall, Feng Shui, arrived before Jianqin with a frosty face. She stood beside Jianqin and faced the leaders of the 5 divine halls. Immediately, a total of 7 leaders had gathered. This was something that rarely happened in the Dark Star race apart from when they had an audience with the Emperor. Now that the situation had developed to this point, it had basically become a stalemate between 2 factions of the 10 divine halls. Naturally, the leader of the 2nd divine hall, Anna, who was in the same faction as the 5th divine hall, could no longer sit still. He flew out from his divine hall as well. Only the 8th divine hall, after losing its leader, was unable to carry the banner with just the 2 weaker vice leaders, so they did not come. On the square of the 5th divine hall, the 2 factions were clearly divided. They were in a stalemate. However, one side had 5 divine halls, while the other only had 3. It was a huge difference, no matter how one looked at it. Sai, Kuan Tian is too ignorant. How can he offend the 6th divine hall to such an extent for a mere 100-saint city? I hope he recovers his memory soon. The leader of the 2nd divine hall, Anna, also felt powerless after knowing the cause and effect. Only Feng Shui, regardless of the reason, right or wrong, stood firmly on the side of Kuan Tian and retorted forcefully. Si Wuqing brought this upon himself. It's not like you don't know that if 100 Saint City was not protected by Kuan Tian, it would have been wiped out by Jia Di long ago. 100 Saint City originally belonged to Kuan Tian's territory. Si Wuqing went to Kuan Tian's territory to extort divine gems without permission. He should be punished. Kuan Tian, you must give us a satisfactory explanation for this matter. Otherwise, we will not let this matter rest. The leader of the 6th divine hall, Owen, said in a deep voice. Chapter 2892. The 2nd hall master, Anna, who was on the same side as the 5th hall master, could not help but sigh inside when he saw how furious Feng Shui was, and how she was about to throw caution to the wind. If the 8th hall master was still present, their side would still have no chance of victory, but they would at least be able to put up some resistance. However, now that the 8th hall master had died, they had lost a powerful ally. How were they supposed to put up a fight against the other side? Despite knowing that they were at a disadvantage, not only did Feng Shui not restrain herself, she even acted aggressively. This gave the second hall master, Anna, a huge headache. Hall Master Feng, calm down. We are no longer the same as before. Anna sent a voice transmission to Feng Shui. He hoped that he could persuade Feng Shui so that they could work together to come up with the most appropriate way to resolve the matter. Hall Master Feng, let me deal with this. Jianqin spoke as well. He was calm and composed, as if he did not take the matter to heart at all. He slowly stepped forward as a meaningful smile appeared on his face. He looked straight at the sixth hall master. Owen, since you want me to give you an explanation, I'll give you one. Owen's heart skipped a beat when he heard Jianqin's words and noticed the sinister and strange smile on Jianqin's face. He had a bad feeling about this. In the next moment, a sword appeared in Jianqin's hand. The moment it appeared, it radiated with a monstrous pulse of energy. A sliver of madness and viciousness appeared in his eyes as he stabbed at Owen without any hesitation. Jianqin did not hold back at all. Even though the might of the strike was not his peak strength due to his need to hide his identity, it was all that he could unleash in his current state. He ripped through the air with his sword, creating a black crack in space. He arrived before Owen in the blink of an eye. Tian, what are you doing? The sudden turn of events immediately caused Owen's face to change drastically. His eyes widened as unconcealable shock and disbelief filled his eyes. He was shocked by the strength that Tian displayed at this moment. It was simply much more powerful than the rumors said. Furthermore, it was even more powerful than when he fought with Deity. This sword already made him feel a strong sense of threat. What was unbelievable was that Tian was just too bold. What was this place? This was the imperial capital of the Dark Star race, and it was where the 10 divine halls resided. He had actually struck out so decisively, and he had used his full strength right from the start. He was utterly fearless. Madman, he really is a madman. Owen could not help but curse inside as he noticed the viciousness and madness in Jianqin's eyes. Although he had already learnt from Deity that Tian had become an unreasonable madman who did not care about the consequences after losing his memories, he did not take it too seriously in the past. Only today did he truly experience just how crazy Tian had become after losing his memories. Even though Owen was shocked by Tian's sudden attack, he was a primordial realm expert after all. He reacted extremely quickly as well. A sword immediately appeared in his hand and powerful energy surged as he directly blocked in front of him. Owen did not dare to directly strike out above the imperial capital fearlessly like Jianqin. He was afraid that he would end up with some unmanageable consequences. Tian, stop! Tian, this is the imperial capital, and it's one of the 10 divine halls. How can you act so recklessly? Tian, have you gone mad? Why don't you take a look at where you are? At the same time, the expressions of the hall masters gathered their change drastically. They all roared out furiously. However, a battle was unavoidable. At that crucial moment, they could only work together to create a barrier and isolate the space. The 10th hall master, Feng Shui, and the 2nd hall master, Anna, clearly understood the severity of the matter. Primordial realm experts could not be allowed to act recklessly in the imperial capital because the shock waves of energy were just too powerful. It would affect all the clansmen in the city below. As a result, the two of them were forced to work together with the other 4 hall masters to create a barrier. Behind them, the vice hall masters present did not stand around idly either. They all contributed, pouring out surging energy to strengthen the barrier. Boom! Almost at the same time as the barrier formed, Jianqin's strike struck Owen's sword mercilessly with overwhelming power. The power was shocking and terrifying. Owen's body shook violently the moment they came in contact. He had struck out hastily, so he was naturally unable to block the strike. He was blown away, slamming into the barrier behind him heavily, causing it to tremble violently. Kun Tian, stop. Even if you want to fight, you can't fight here. Feng Shui's voice rang out with some worry. However, Jianqin did not seem to hear her at all. He also seemed to have completely descended into madness, having lost all rationality. He could not hear anything. His eyes were completely red and bloodshot. His madness did not weaken at all. Instead, it became even more powerful. He laughed aloud. Ha ha ha. Don't you want an explanation? I'll give you an explanation. I'll give you an explanation right now. As he spoke, the aura on his body surged. He was wearing the divine armor and holding the divine sword. Both the divine armor and the divine sword emitted dazzling light. The powerful energy was earth-shattering. He attacked again, slashing at Owen with all his might. Owen's face darkened and paled. He had never thought that the situation would develop like this. In particular, when he saw the scarlet light in Kun Tian's eyes that had clearly lost all rationality, he actually began to feel some regret. The next moment, with a deafening roar, Jianqin and Owen exchanged blows again. However, it was obvious that Owen could not attack as recklessly as Jianqin. Hence, he could only defend passively. As a result, he let out a muffled groan from Jianqin's attack. His body flew out again, colliding with the energy barrier created by the combined efforts of several hall masters and many deputy hall masters, causing it to tremble violently. On the other side, Jianqin was still laughing. He seemed to be at his peak. Moreover, there was a faint layer of blood-red light emanating from his body. Since the appearance of the blood-red light, his already powerful presence rose again. The energy fluctuations on his body became even more terrifying. Oh no, he's burning his blood essence. He's burning his blood essence. Burning his blood essence? Oh no, Kun Tian has completely lost his rationality. How can he burn his blood essence? Quick, stop him. Seeing this scene, the expressions of all the hall masters from both camps changed. They were all horrified. Burning his blood essence. Was this a battle to the death? The palace masters of the two camps had been fighting for so many years, and they had fought more than once, but they had never developed into such a situation where they would not rest until one of them was dead. Even serious injuries were rare, and most of the time, they would stop after a certain point. Chapter 2893. Seeing that Kun Tian had gone crazy to such an unreasonable extent, the sixth hall master was a little dumbfounded. Because of Kun Tian's current state, even Owen himself suspected that he had some deep enmity with Kun Tian in the past. Otherwise, why would Kun Tian act like this? Kun Tian, you have to understand that you're the one who insulted the vice leader of my sixth hall first. I'm only asking for an explanation. Don't go too far. Owen actually became rather fearful at that moment. After all, the primordial realm experts of the Dark Star world were not the same as the primordial realm experts of the Saints world. There had never been any battles to the death between primordial realm experts in the Dark Star race. When they were in the Divine King's realm, their battles to the death were extremely rare. The reason why all of them were far more powerful than cultivators of the Saints world at the same level of cultivation was because the amount of time they spent at each level of cultivation could be described as astronomical. They were so sturdy that basically no one in the Saints world could match them. On the other hand, the cultivators of the Saints world would experience countless battles to the death with each level of cultivation. As a result, the Dark Star race was naturally weaker than the Saints world in terms of viciousness. It was true that the reckless were afraid of the unreasonable, and the unreasonable were afraid of those who did not care about their lives. Hence, when he saw Kun Tian looking like he was going to risk his life, Owen immediately panicked and no longer had the aggressive attitude from before. A few of the leaders who maintained the barrier had already withdrawn their energy. They were prepared to stop Kun Tian together. They could already tell that Kun Tian's strength was not much weaker than Owen's. In fact, they were evenly matched. Kun Tian was already so powerful. Coupled with the increase in his combat strength after burning his blood essence, Owen was no match for him. Unless Owen was as crazy as Kuan Tian, burning his essence blood without any regard for the consequences. However, they clearly would not allow the matter to develop to that point. Maintain the energy barrier. Leave the rest to the Emperor. At this moment, a calm voice rang out from above. It came from the Dark Star Emperor in the Imperial Palace. Upon hearing the great Emperor's voice, the extremely nervous Hall Masters and Deputy Hall Masters immediately heaved a sigh of relief as though they had found their savior. Since the great Emperor had personally stepped in, he would be able to suppress anything that happened. With that said, a huge royal seal descended from the sky, emitting a dazzling light. It was as though a small sun had appeared in the sky, bringing with it a majestic pressure that could suppress everything as it came crashing down on Genshin. A medium-grade divine artifact, and a relatively intact one at that. Genshin's heart shivered. In the Saints' world, only chaotic primes possessed medium-quality god artifacts. Of course, there were extremely few peak infinite primes who possessed them as well. As a matter of fact, even some of the less wealthy peak experts who had just become grand primes still used medium-quality god artifacts when they did not possess high-quality god artifacts. Medium-quality god artifacts were so powerful that low-quality god artifacts could not be compared to them. However, only chaotic primes could unleash their full power. Now that the Dark Star Emperor actually possessed a relatively intact medium-quality god artifact, the pressure on Genshin immediately increased. Even though the Dark Star Emperor was unable to unleash the full power of a medium-quality god artifact, just a portion of it was enough to shake up the world. Genshin did not try to resist or dodge the descending royal seal. Instead, he only looked at Owen as if he did not notice the descending royal seal at all. Bang! With a heavy sound, the descending royal seal directly crushed down on Genshin with irresistible power. As it constantly radiated, it immediately stopped Genshin from moving. Of course, even though he was suppressed by the royal seal, Genshin continued to act like he was insane. The redness in his eyes did not vanish, and he continued to act like he had lost his mind. He stared at Owen with a pair of crazy eyes as he roared out furiously. The Dark Star Emperor clearly had no intentions of harming Genshin. As a result, even though the royal seal was filled with power, it only stopped Genshin from moving. It did not harm him at all. Kuan Tian, why don't you wake up? The Dark Star Emperor's voice rang out from the sky. His voice was very flat, but it was filled with an unquestionable dignity. Moreover, the voice seemed to possess some sort of charm. It possessed a certain level of soul-sucking power, causing the souls of the Hall Lords and Vice Hall Lords to tremble. It was soul-sucking. After the Dark Star Emperor finished speaking, the several Hall Masters on the scene discovered that the veins in Kuan Tian's eyes were actually slowly fading away. His entire person gradually calmed down. Finally, after a few breaths, the various Hall Masters finally breathed a sigh of relief. This was because they could already see the normal expression in Kuan Tian's eyes. They knew that Kuan Tian, who had sunk into madness, had completely recovered. The Dark Star Emperor's royal seal also flew into the sky, and the suppressive force vanished. Feng Shui arrived in front of Genshin in a flash. Her face was filled with undisguised concern and worry. Kuan Tian, you're finally awake. Do you know what you were doing? You really scared me to death. Kuan Tian, what happened to you earlier? Why did you suddenly become like that? The second Hall Lord and Erna also came in front of Genshin and asked with a frown. Genshin took a few deep breaths and revealed a look of lingering fear. It's the astral beast. The astral beast's memories I obtained in the depths of Two World Mountain were mixed with a little bit of ruthlessness. I was unknowingly affected by it. The only thought in my mind was slaughter and destruction, death and destruction. Upon hearing that, Feng Shui and Erna's expressions changed. They turned extremely solemn. At this moment, the 5 Hall Masters on the opposite side were also looking at each other. In fact, some of their eyes were even filled with fear. This was because Jianshin's final sentence, "The only thought in my mind was slaughter and destruction, death and destruction," made all of their pupils contract. If Kun Tian really became like that, where he would lose his mind and go on a killing spree after being slightly angered, who would dare to provoke him in the future? Who would provoke a lunatic who could engage in a life-and-death battle with their lives at any time over such a trivial matter? At that moment, the Sixth Hall Lord, Owen, was so regretful that his intestines turned green. If he had known that Kun Tian would completely lose control after being slightly angered, he would never have personally stepped in. In the end, not only did he fail to regain his dignity, he even ended up in a sorry state. He had really gone for wool and come home shorn. A figure descended from the sky. The Dark Star Emperor had personally appeared. From his appearance, he looked like a young man in his 20s. He was extraordinarily handsome, but his eyes were filled with vicissitudes of life. Greetings, Great Emperor. Chapter 2894. However, the Dark Star Emperor seemed to only have eyes for Jianshin. He stared at Jianshin without blinking at all. His gaze was not sharp, and his brows would furrow and relax at times. Quite a while later, the Dark Star Emperor said in a gloomy voice, "My soul has been affected, and we're unable to resolve it right now. Not to mention, it's related to star beasts." The Dark Star Emperor's voice was filled with powerlessness. Not only were the Dark Star race powerless over the injuries to the soul, but it was also an extremely troublesome matter even in the saints' world. Kun Tian, the Emperor, already knows about what happened in the 100 Saints city. Even if Si Wuqing was at fault first, you shouldn't have humiliated her. You still need to give the 6th Hall an explanation for this matter. Let's start with the medicinal garden. In the future, before the fruit of Tao ripens, your 5th Hall will be in charge of the 6th Hall's divine crystals, said the Dark Star Emperor. Kun Tian, what do you think of the Emperor's suggestion? The Dark Star Emperor was stern. Although his voice was calm and relaxed, he did not lose his dignity. Yes, Emperor. Jianshin clasped his fist. He was not worried about the divine crystals. If nothing unexpected happened, the 100 Saint City would receive a large batch of supreme grade divine crystals soon. It would be more than enough. Owen, what about your 6th divine hall? The Dark Star Emperor looked at Owen and the others. Thank you for upholding justice, Emperor. Our 6th divine hall will follow your arrangements, Owen said with the Vice Hall Masters of the 6th Hall in a hurry. In reality, after learning that Kun Tian's current condition was unstable and that he could lose his mind at any time, the 6th Divine Hall had already given up on seeking justice. Now that the Dark Star Emperor had personally stepped forward and settled the matter with a single word, not only did he help them regain their dignity, but he had also resolved the problem of the supply of divine crystals that the 6th Hall faced. This was already the best outcome for the 6th Hall Master, who had already given up on provoking Kun Tian. The Dark Star Great Emperor swept his gaze across all the Hall Masters present and said indifferently, "I'm sure you've all seen Kun Tian's situation. He's been affected by the memories of the Star Beast. Once he's angered, he'll lose control. So during this period of time, remember not to have any more conflicts. Now that the day of the grand sacrificial ceremony is approaching, all palace masters must not cause any more trouble." Yes, Great Emperor. The 3rd Hall, 4th Hall, 6th Hall, 7th Hall, and 9th Hall Masters all agreed. In fact, there was no need for the Dark Star Great Emperor to say anything. After personally witnessing Kun Tian's madness of risking his life, all of them felt fear in their hearts. They had already made up their minds to not provoke Kun Tian before he returned to normal. With the intervention of the Dark Star Emperor, the matter of Jianshin humiliating the 6th Palace's Deputy Palace Master in the 100 Saint City was finally resolved, with the 5th Palace providing the 6th Palace with the energy supply of the divine crystals. Subsequently, all the Hall Masters dispersed. Before the 7th Hall Master, Jiadi, left, he glanced at Jianshin with an unwilling look. Now that the supply of divine crystals had increased, the 10 divine halls were facing a shortage of divine crystals. Their 7th hall's deputy palace master, Enlai, would go to the 100 Saints city. If there were no accidents, he would be able to harvest a large amount of divine crystals. At that time, it would be more than enough to fill the gap in the Garden, and there would still be a large surplus. However, Kuan Tian's departure completely destroyed the 7th hall's beautiful matter. Today, a large part of the reason why he stood up for the 6th divine hall was that he wanted to use the matter of the 6th divine hall as a pretext to put pressure on Kuan Tian and recover some of the losses in the 100 Saints city. But after seeing Kuan Tian's state, he didn't dare to force him. He could only leave with a resentful heart. After the 5 palace masters left, the 2nd hall master, Anna, asked about Jianshin's current situation with concern, and then returned to his own divine hall. Feng Shui was the last person to leave. She went to the 5th palace and sat for a while. She was very worried about Kuan Tian's current unstable mental state. After asking about his well-being, she reluctantly left the 5th palace. Suddenly, the 5th palace regained its former tranquility. Jianshin, who had experienced a storm not long ago, sat on the palace master's throne as if nothing had happened. He was calculating how many divine crystals the 100 Saints city would bring him. At this moment, a special envoy from the Dark Star Divine Hall came to the 5th palace, bowed to Jianshin, who was sitting on the throne, and said in a slightly respectful tone, "5th Palace Master, the Great Emperor summons you to go to the Dark Star Divine Hall quickly." Hearing this, a hint of surprise flashed in Jianshin's eyes, and then his gaze condensed slightly. He carefully recalled what he had done during this period of time in his mind. After confirming that there were no flaws, he immediately got up and left the 5th palace. He soared into the sky and flew directly to the Dark Star Divine Hall suspended above his head. In the Dark Star Divine Hall, in the magnificent hall, the Dark Star Emperor seemed to have been waiting for a long time. He sat on the throne and looked at Jianshin, who stepped into the divine hall. "Greetings to the great emperor." Jianshin came to the center of the hall and bowed with a solemn expression. "Kuan Tian, the emperor summons you for one thing. Have you recovered your memory?" The Dark Star Emperor sat on the throne and asked calmly. "Not yet." Jianshin shook his head. "The day of the great sacrifice is approaching. If your memory has not recovered, it will more or less affect the great sacrifice. And this great sacrifice concerns the fate of our entire clan. It is of utmost importance, and there is no room for any mistakes. Therefore, you must recover your memory as soon as possible." The Dark Star Emperor said in an indisputable tone. In the face of such a major event that concerned the fate of the entire clan, he would not allow any unstable factors to exist. "Yes, great emperor. In fact, I also obtained an extremely extraordinary elixir in this trip to the 100 Saints city. This elixir may have some possibility of continuing my recovery." Jianshin said. The Dark Star Emperor nodded slightly and said, "That's good. Take the elixir now. The emperor will personally guard you. Someone, go and get the 9 apertures spiritual liquid that the emperor has been accumulating for many years." "Yes, great emperor." Outside the Dark Star Sacred Palace, a servant quickly returned with a white jade bottle and handed it to the Dark Star Emperor. The Dark Star Emperor held the bottle and said, "The 9 apertures spiritual liquid comes from the saints' world. Our Dark Star race is unable to create a treasure like this. It also targets the soul. It can heal and purify the soul. Now that the great sacrifice is around the corner, the Emperor will use the 9 apertures spiritual liquid on you. I hope it can completely heal all the problems on your soul." Jianshin hesitated and said, "Great Emperor, it probably won't be effective unless it's at God tier." "Don't worry. Even though the 9 apertures spiritual liquid was not at God tier when I first obtained it, the Dark Star Emperor has been accumulating it for many years. However, after so many years of nurturing by me, the 9 apertures spiritual liquid has already reached the God tier. It's even effective on primordial realm experts," said the Dark Star Emperor. Afterwards, he paused slightly and called out gently, Tiansheng. Then he could not help but glance at Tian Shangxian and immediately took him seriously. His instincts told him that Tian Shangxian was anything but simple. Of course, what truly surprised him was that Tian Xingxian's existence had actually been hidden in the Dark Star race for so many years. Now he had no idea how long Tian Shangxian had been in the Dark Star race. It would be fine if he had not been there for a long time, but if he had already existed for a very long time, it would be rather terrifying. Jianqin could not help but secretly become vigilant as a result. Kun Tian, let's begin. First, take the pill you obtained in the 100 Saints city. If that pill is not enough to help you recover, then I'll use the 9 apertures spiritual liquid to add fuel to the fire, said Tian Shangxian. His tone was kind, giving off an amiable feeling. Jianqin hesitated slightly before saying with some doubt, Emperor, I think Tian Shangxian is only equivalent to a divine king. Can a divine king assist a primordial realm expert in recovering? Or does Tian Shangxian possess an extremely great mastery over the soul, where even we can only look up to him in the dust? The Dark Star Emperor did not find Kun Tian's doubts strange at all, as even he could not tell what level of cultivation Tian Shangxian possessed. It was just that most of the time, Tian Shangxian did seem like a divine king. Anyone would object to a divine king interfering with the recovery of a primordial realm expert. Kun Tian, you mustn't underestimate Tiansheng, and you mustn't disrespect him in the slightest. This is because Tiansheng is not only a great sage of our clan, but also the person with the highest seniority in our clan. If you really want to talk about it, Tian Shangxian is our senior. Moreover, Tian Xingxian's strength is nowhere near as simple as it seems. As a result, you cannot treat Tian Shangxian as a divine king. As for his mastery over the soul, Tian Shangxian can indeed be regarded as the greatest in our race. With Tian Shangxian guiding you, your chances of recovery will increase drastically, the Dark Star Emperor explained patiently. Emperor, there's something I don't understand. Tian Xingxian's seniority is actually greater than everyone in our race, so why has no one known about him after all these years? Jianqin asked. He was extremely cautious about Tian Shangxian. Enough, stop asking. I can't tell you the exact details about Tian Shangxian right now, as that's the greatest secret of our race. When it's time to tell you, the Emperor will naturally tell you. The Dark Star Emperor was unwilling to say anything more. Clearly, Tian Xingxian's identity was just too sensitive, where even people like the 10 leaders did not know about him. Jianqin knew that he would not be able to get anything more out of him, so he did not waste any more time. Instead, he immediately sat down and swallowed the pill he had obtained from the Jade Pill sect. What a pity! The grade of this pill is quite good. Even in the Saints' world, it's rare. I didn't want to waste it like this, but I have no choice now. Jianqin felt extremely helpless when he swallowed the pill. After all, this was a pill for healing the soul. Its effects were definitely greater than the scarlet, glazed fruit. Even Jianqin felt rather pained over wasting such a precious pill. This was because regular pills were relatively easy to obtain in the Saints' world. However, pills that could heal the soul, especially those that possessed the presence of pure souls, were truly rare. Tian Shangxian, I'll be troubling you, the Dark Star Emperor said to Tian Shangxian secretly when he saw how Kun Tian had already entered a state of recovery. You're too polite, Emperor. I will do my best, Tian Shangxian replied back. Tian Shangxian also replied through a communication technique. He was neither haughty nor humble. His eyes hidden in the mist also looked at Jianqin's face as he smiled mysteriously. Chapter 2896. On the other side, Jianqin seemed to enter a selfless state of healing after ingesting the pill from the Jade Pill sect. But in reality, he didn't treat his injuries at all, because he wasn't injured at all. Swallowing the medicinal pill and assuming a meditative state was just an act on the surface. In reality, he was extremely vigilant in his heart and secretly raised his vigilance to the highest level. He wasn't wary of the Dark Star Emperor, and he wasn't too worried that the Dark Star Emperor would notice any clues. Although the Dark Star Emperor possessed supreme strength, where he could challenge those at a higher level and possess battle prowess on par with first heavenly layer chaotic primes, or even second heavenly layer chaotic primes, Jianqin was confident he could retreat safely from an expert like that. What he truly feared was Tian Shengxian, who had suddenly appeared. In particular, after learning about Tian Shengxian's origins, his fear towards Tian Shengxian had reached an unprecedented level. This was because he could not see through Tian Shengxian at all. Tian Shengxian was like a cloud of mist, enveloping him and hiding him deeply. Jianqin knew that the more a person acted like that, the more terrifying they were. It had to be mentioned that the pill from the Jade Pill sect was extraordinarily effective. Even if his soul was not injured at all, the pill would still provide him with great nourishment. With the effects of the pill, Jianqin immediately felt his soul become refreshed as if it had been cleansed. Not only had it become more condensed, but the presence of the purest soul within the pill had the wondrous effect of strengthening his soul, making it even more robust. As a result, Jianqin could clearly sense his soul increase slightly after ingesting the pill. Even though the increase was not very great due to the number of purer souls or the quality of the purer souls, it was truly an increase. After all, with his current level of cultivation and the strength of his soul, it was absolutely not an easy task for him to improve again. However, a single pill was able to bring about such an effect, and it was sufficient to show how precious this pill was. It is said that this medicinal pellet was personally refined by the ancestor of the Jade Pellet sect, as expected of a divine pellet born from the hands of a peak expert. Even under the extremely harsh conditions of being sent to the Dark Star realm, he was still able to refine such an astonishing medicinal pellet. If it were the Saint's world, the effects of the pill would definitely be even more astonishing. Jianqin secretly admired the ancestor of the Jade Pill sect. Although he had taken advantage of the Jade Pill sect, the Jade Pill sect's old ancestors' attainments in alchemy had indeed reached the peak of perfection. Before long, the effects of the pill gradually ran out. However, Tian Shengxian, who Jianqin had always been on guard against, did not do anything at all. Jianqin did not sense any senses of his soul at all. He could not help but doubt himself. Had Tian Shengxian really been sent by the Dark Star Emperor to assist him? If he was assisting him, why did he not do anything at all? Kun Tian, you can leave first. At this moment, Tian Shengxian suddenly said. At this moment, Tian Shengxian suddenly spoke. With that, Jianqin, who was still sitting with his eyes closed and pretending to heal, was shocked. At that moment, he even felt a sliver of shock inside. Ever since he had swallowed the pill, he had not moved at all. He had remained motionless like a statue. Yet, Tian Shengxian had been able to tell with great precision that the pill had run out of efficacy without releasing his consciousness. How could he not be shocked? Tian Shengxian, what are you doing? A sliver of surprise appeared in the Dark Star Emperor's eyes. He looked at Kun Tian hesitantly. He had no idea whether Kun Tian was awake or not. After a while of silence, he asked, Kun Tian, have you recovered your memories? Jianqin opened his eyes. The disappointment on his face was undisguised. He stood up and clasped his fist at the Dark Star Emperor. I've let you down. I haven't recovered. The doubt in the Dark Star Emperor's eyes deepened. If Kun Tian had not recovered, he had prepared the 9 orifices spiritual liquid. It was also a rare item that was greatly beneficial to the soul. So why did Tian Shengxian ask Kun Tian to leave? Tian Shengxian did not answer. Instead, he continued to say to Jianqin, Kun Tian, there's nothing for you to do here. You can leave for now. The Dark Star Emperor was filled with doubt. However, out of his absolute trust in Tian Shengxian, he followed Tian Shengxian's wishes and allowed Jianqin to leave. Tian Shengxian, can you clear up the doubts of the Emperor? The Dark Star Emperor asked Tian Shengxian after Jianchen left. Your Majesty, I have not sensed any damage to Kun Tian's soul. If it really is, it means that it's beyond my abilities. Forgive me for being powerless, Tian Shengxian said calmly. The Dark Star Emperor frowned. No damage? Since there's no damage, why hasn't Kun Tian's memory recovered? Perhaps it's because of the soul destruction land. After all, this place is one of the most dangerous places formed after the fall of the Star Beast. It's not strange for anything that involves the level of the Star Beast to be unexplainable, Tian Shengxian said. The Dark Star Emperor nodded in agreement. He knew the land of soul destruction better than anyone else because he had stayed there for quite some time in the past, so he had experienced all sorts of dangers there. Therefore, in the Dark Star Emperor's opinion, it was not incomprehensible that Kun Tian had lost his memory even though his soul had recovered. After all, this was related to the soul extinguishing land, and the level involved was too high. Tian Shengxian, is there really no other way? If Kun Tian does not recover his memories, it will definitely have a great impact on the great ritual. The Dark Star Emperor was still unwilling to give up even the slightest hope. After all, this was a great ceremony that could decide the fate of the entire race. There was no room for any carelessness, let alone the slightest mistake. Tian Shengxian shook his head and said nothing. The Dark Star Emperor could not help but sigh. Looks like we can only think of other ways. On the other side, as soon as Jianchen returned to the 5th Divine Hall, he immediately shut himself in a secret room. In the dimly lit secret room, Jianchen sat with his legs crossed with his eyes closed. His expression was calm and peaceful, but in truth his heart was like a surging ocean. What he had experienced in the Dark Star Divine Hall kept replaying in his mind. That mysterious Tian Shengxian had made him feel an immense threat that he had never felt before. This was a threat. Perhaps it did not concern his own life, but his true identity. This was because he clearly did not sense any movements from Tian Shengxian in the Dark Star Divine Hall, nor did he spread out his consciousness at all. Yet Tian Shengxian could tell that the effects of the divine pill had been exhausted. To be able to do that, it meant that Tian Shengxian's strength had reached an extremely terrifying level. Of course, if it was just this, it could be understood that Tian Shengxian might have some special ability that allowed him to ignore the difference in realms and keenly sense some changes in the divine pill. However, as for the 9 apertures spiritual liquid, the Dark Star Emperor originally wanted to continue using the 9 apertures spiritual liquid to let Kun Tian recover his memories in case the divine pill failed. However, when the divine pill's effects were exhausted, Tian Shengxian did not have the slightest intention of letting him continue using the 9 apertures spiritual liquid. Instead, he directly asked him to leave. It was as if he expected that even if he used the 9 apertures spiritual liquid, it would not have any effect. Or it could be said that Tian Shengxian wanted to keep the 9 apertures spiritual liquid and did not want such a precious thing to be used on him. However, regardless of the result, it gave Jianchen a great sense of crisis. He was very worried that his identity would be seen through by Tian Shengxian. Or had he been seen through by Tian Shengxian? Many thoughts flashed through Jianchen's mind, causing his expression to change. Although he did not value this identity, without it, it would be much more difficult for him to rescue Siyu. Furthermore, he had promised the heartless child to disrupt the Dark Star tribe's ritual. Chapter 2897. I never thought that the Dark Star race would actually have someone like Tian Shengxian. It looks like I have to be careful in the future. But most importantly, I still don't know whether Tian Shengxian has seen through my identity or not. He probably hasn't. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for him to remain so calm when he suddenly discovered that the 5th Hall Master of the Dark Star race was no longer the same person, Jianchen thought. He had always been paying attention to Tian Shengxian's every move in the Dark Star Divine Hall. Now that he thought about it, Tian Shengxian had remained extremely calm the entire time in the Dark Star Divine Hall. He did not seem to be affected at all. The mask that Senior Mo Tianyan gave me is extraordinary. As long as I wear the mask, even Grand Primes won't be able to see through my true identity. The mask will only lose its effects when I encounter people who have reached the peak of 9th heavenly layer of Grand Primes. Although I don't know where Tian Shengxian came from or what abilities he has, it's impossible for him to be an expert like that. That's because this is the Dark Star world. It's a special place where chaotic primes have never appeared. Genshin's anxious heart finally settled down when he thought up to there. He calmed down. Of course, his greatest source of confidence was his own strength. Apart from the Dark Star Emperor, there really was no one who could threaten him in the current Dark Star race. However, after learning about Tian Xingxian's existence, Genshin understood something. Although the Dark Star race was small, they had once been glorious. Even though they had declined now, they could not be underestimated. For a special existence like the Heaven Sage that no one knew about, no one knew if there were any more hidden in the Dark Star realm. And how many were there? This made him a little more fearful of the Dark Star race, which was relatively weak compared to the rest of his race. What Genshin did not know was that while he was in the secret room of the 5th Divine Hall, the illusory Tian Shengxian hovered silently in the Imperial Palace above the 10 Divine Halls like a ghost. His eyes were hidden in the mist, and no one could see them. He was currently staring in the direction of the 5th Divine Hall. His gaze seemed to be able to lock onto Genshin's current location with great precision. He was actually staring in the direction of the secret room with great precision. Genshin, oh Genshin, you've caused quite a lot of trouble in the Dark Star race recently. You wear a strange mask, so no one in the Dark Star race can see through your true identity aside from me. Losing your memories has covered up all possible openings, but you can't really fool the upper echelon of the Dark Star race. It's fine if it happens once or twice, but if it happens too often, it will eventually be exposed. It doesn't matter if you're exposed, but if you delay my important matters, then you deserve to die. Although you can't die in the Dark Star realm yet. I hope that my appearance will make you more vigilant. Don't be as unbridled as before. Since you've chosen the identity of Kuan Tian, then you must play the role of Kuan Tian to the end. Tian Shengxian hovered in the air like a ghost. No one could discover his existence as he muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear. In the next few days, Genshin did not leave the 5th Divine Hall. On the surface, he was researching the high-grade Divine King Grass, as if he was exploring and trying to use the energy inside the Divine King Grass, but in reality, he was thinking of countermeasures for the various situations that he might encounter later. The existence of Tian Shengxian forced Genshin to prepare for the worst in advance. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. Today was the deadline that Genshin gave the 100 Holy City 3 days to collect divine crystals. 3 days have passed. I wonder how the collection of divine crystals in the 100 Saint City is going. After 3 days, Genshin walked out of the secret room. He handed over the several hundred stalks of divine king grass that he had destroyed in the past 3 days to the servants to deal with. He then left with Bing Yuan. The Dark Star Emperor knows about what happened in 100 Saints City pretty quickly. He is already paying attention to that place personally and has even planted spies inside. Plus, there is a mysterious and strange heavenly sage. It seems that I have to be more careful in 100 Saint City. Genshin thought. After the trip to the Dark Star Divine Palace, his vigilance had increased greatly. In the 100 Saint City, all the forces stationed in the 100 Saint City had gathered in the Temple of the Gods. Everyone sat in front of the huge conference table in the Temple of the Gods without saying a word, making the atmosphere in the Temple of the Gods extremely gloomy. This was because a sentence was echoing in their minds for a long time. It was the 50 places of protection given by the 5th Hall Master 3 days ago. The results of these 50 places directly caused the anxiety and uneasiness in their hearts to grow stronger every time they swept their eyes across the crowd. Although there were not 100 forces gathered in the Temple of the Gods, there were still 80 to 90. This meant that at least 1/3 of the forces could not continue to survive in the 100 Saint City. The elimination rate was simply too high. It was so high that all of the major powers present felt a sense of danger. Has the family not sent a message yet? In the Temple of the Gods, Lei Jun of the Heavenly Thunder clan asked the servant beside him more than once. He could be said to be the most nervous and worried one among the people present. This was because the geniuses of the other forces had almost all collected enough divine crystals, but there was still no news from the Heavenly Thunder clan. The servant shook his head. He was also very nervous. Could it be that the Heavenly Thunder clan had already given up the foundation of the Dark Star clan? The fifth Hall Master has arrived. At this moment, a loud voice came from outside the Temple of the Gods. The geniuses, sitting at the conference table, stood up with a swoosh. They all looked solemn as they saluted the fifth Hall Master in unison. Jian directly made his way to the main seat and sat down. Bing Yuan followed beside him silently, but the light in his eyes flickered slightly. He looked at the prodigies with some eagerness hidden in his gaze, because the fifth hall was about to run out of divine crystals. Although they had already purchased a large amount of divine crystals, it was still not enough. Whether they could solve the problem of divine crystals supply completely depended on today. Chapter 2898. Honorable Lord Temple Master, our Lutian family has prepared 5 billion top-grade divine crystals. We hope that we can obtain Lord Temple Master's protection for 500 years. Our heavenly sect has also prepared 5 billion top-grade divine crystals. We have specially come to offer it to Lord Temple Master. The representatives of the various major powers were waiting for Jianchen to say those words. Thus, when Jianchen spoke, all the powers gathered in the Temple of all Gods took out a space ring that they had prepared. Every space ring was filled with 5 billion top-grade divine crystals. Moreover, the number would only increase. When Jianchen's spiritual sense swept over the space rings, he even discovered that there were several space rings that had over 7 billion top-grade divine crystals prepared. There was an extra 2 billion. The purpose of the extra amount was naturally self-evident. However, what made Jianchen sigh in his heart was that one of the space rings that had over 7 billion top-grade divine crystals prepared just so happened to be from He-Chan-Chan. It was very clear that the Tianhe clan truly valued certain unique and rare resources in the Dark Star realm very much. They were unable to bring in divine-level heavenly treasures or medicinal pellets that could heal injuries to the origin spirit. It was also very difficult for them to pay the great price of 10 billion top-quality divine crystals every 100 years that Jia Di had requested. However, the Tianhe clan actually did not hesitate to pay an excessive price of 1 billion top-quality divine crystals every 100 years in order to obtain one of the 50 quotas. This caused Jianchen to sigh in his heart. At the same time, he also felt a bit of reluctance. After all, at least in the Dark Star realm, he was still a member of the Tianhe family in name. Furthermore, during the period of time in the Dark Star realm, He-Chan-Chan had treated him rather well. In his heart, he had also treated He-Chan-Chan as a friend. Unfortunately, he had to let He-Chan-Chan enter the Dark Star realm. To her, this was a form of protection. The space rings all had their screens removed. Thus, Bing Yuan, who was standing beside Jianchen, also used his spiritual sense to observe the number of divine crystals in the space rings. This immediately caused Bing Yuan to suck in a breath of cold air. Soon after, his face flushed red. Every single force had prepared at least 5 billion divine crystals. None of them had prepared less than 5 billion divine crystals. Now that there were dozens of forces present, the amount of divine crystals they had gathered was truly an astronomical figure. Now that the Dark Star clan was on the verge of breaking through, the energy they required had increased by several dozen times or even 100 times. As a result, the entire Dark Star clan was extremely lacking in divine crystals. With the help of so many divine crystals, they would definitely be able to resolve their current situation. A satisfied smile appeared on Jianchen's face as well. He said, "Very good, very good. Since all of you have fulfilled my requirements on time, I will naturally keep my promise and protect 50 of you. Now, place your spatial rings on the table, and I will choose 50 of them." Therefore, the many heavenly legends gathered in the Pantheon Palace placed the 50 space rings on the conference table one by one with excitement and anxiety. Jianchen sank into his thoughts, as if he was considering which of them he should protect. Finally, after a few seconds of hesitation, he chose the first force. He extended his finger, and a single space ring immediately levitated up from the many space rings on the conference table and hovered before him. This meant that he had accepted the spatial ring. As for the owner of the spatial ring who took it out, their faction would be protected for 500 years from now on. Of course, this protection would be granted in the name of the fifth Hall Master, Kuan Tian. On the other hand, the faction that had been chosen revealed an excited expression. Their hearts, which had been in their throats, finally settled down. After all, there were only 50 spots, while there were 70 or 80 forces gathered in the Pantheon Palace. At least a third of them would be eliminated. Afterwards, Jianchen moved faster and faster. Space rings hovered before him one after another. All the chosen forces became excited, as if they had been relieved of a heavy burden. As for the forces that had not been chosen, they became more and more nervous. In particular, when the number of space rings before Jianchen reached 40, a few heavenly legends struggled to maintain their composure. Nervousness and worry appeared on their faces, and there were even people whose heads were covered in sweat. He Qianqian was one of them. Even on her country-toppling face, a bit of paleness could be seen. Hao Jia from the Prosper Plain was also extremely nervous. Even though Hao Jia was extremely powerful in the Saints' world, it was still difficult for them to collect some rare resources. If they lost some of the special resources in the Dark Star world, it would greatly affect the cultivation of Hao Jia's talents. Very soon, the number of space rings before Jianchen reached 49. There was only one spot left. Most of the forces that had not been chosen had already fallen into despair. All of them seemed to have lost their wits. Finally, He Qianqian could no longer hold back her anxiety. She said, "Fifth Hall Master, our Tianhe clan has prepared 7.5 billion supreme, grade, divine crystals, and this is only the first batch. There will be a second batch that will be sent in slowly. Please, shut up." What she received in reply was Jianchen's cold words and icy gaze. Jianchen directly interrupted He Qianqian's words and coldly stated, "This Hall Lord's choice is not up to you to tell me what to do." He Qianqian's face immediately darkened and paled. She immediately shut her mouth. She had already realized that she had angered the fifth Hall Master by speaking rashly. Perhaps she had already left a bad impression on him. With He Qianqian as an example, the several dozen organizations that had not been chosen immediately shut their mouths obediently. They all knew that the fifth Hall Master had a fiery temper and was easily angered. As a result, all of them remained silent. They only waited for the final spot to be decided with unease and anticipation. Jianchen clearly hesitated over the final spot, but his hesitation did not last for too long. In the end, he made his decision. He chose the Tian sect. The Tian sect was the ruler of planet Vastness, one of the 81 great planets of the Saints' world. The strongest ancestor of planet Vastness was the planet Lord. Without any exaggeration, the status of the Tian sect was equivalent to royalty on planet Vastness. The 50 spots had all been decided. The organizations that had been chosen all smiled victoriously, while those that had not been chosen all revealed extremely ugly expressions. He Qianqian was even more dejected. At the same time, she was filled with doubt. The divine crystals that her Tianhe clan had provided were definitely one of the greatest. She did not understand why the fifth Hall Master would rather choose organizations that had only offered 5 billion divine crystals than the Tianhe clan that had offered over 7 billion divine crystals. Was it because of my words? He Qianqian asked herself. Chapter 2899. Lei Jun's forehead immediately became covered with cold sweat. He said in a hurry, "Esteemed Hall Master, the jade you need is incomparable to supreme grade divine crystals. In reality, the reason why everyone here was able to collect so many supreme grade divine crystals in 3 days was because the divine crystals did not come from their clans in the Saints' world. Instead, they borrowed them from the various large organizations in the ruins of the Spirit's world. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for them to collect 5 billion supreme grade divine crystals in 3 days. As for the jade stone that Palace Master needs, although this junior doesn't know its exact value, it must be an extremely precious item. Even our Heavenly Thunder clan doesn't have this kind of jade stone. It was obtained by our clan's seniors through other means. As a result, it will definitely take some time for our clan to gather the 30 pieces of jade you need. I hope the Hall Master can give us a few more days." Jianqin agreed with what Lei Jun said. He knew exactly how far the ruins of the Spirit's world were from the Saints' world. Just passing through the passageway between the two worlds from the ruins of the Spirit's world to the Saints' world would take quite some time. Moreover, once they arrived in the Saints' world, they would need a certain amount of time to return to their clans from the vast Saints' world. Back then, the Heartless Child had taken him with him. With the Heartless Child's supreme cultivation, he had basically reached a terrifying level where he could ignore distance to a certain extent. As a result, they did not waste too much time on the journey. However, not everyone possessed the same level of cultivation as the Heartless Child, so it was clearly rather unrealistic for the Heavenly Thunder clan to complete the task in 3 days. Jianqin stopped urging the Heavenly Thunder clan when he thought up to there. He said, "Then I'll give you another 7 days. Whether your Heavenly Thunder clan stays or leaves after that will be up to you." Afterwards, Jianqin gave a few more details before leaving the 100 Saint City with Bing Yuan. At the same time, he took the 50 space rings with him. Every single one of the space rings contained over 5 billion supreme grade divine crystals. There were quite a few 100 million or over a billion as well. This was a rather large number to the Darkstar race. It was enough to fill up the gap in the garden. Bing Yuan, who was standing beside Jianqin, wanted to say something but stopped himself. He really couldn't understand why the Temple Master didn't accept everyone's divine crystals. What was the difference between having 50 factions and having a faction? Who in the Darkstar race would miss out on such a great opportunity to obtain over 100 billion supreme grade divine crystals without having to pay any extra price? However, when Bing Yuan thought about how the Hall Master had become extremely irritable due to the influence of the Star Beast after the trip to the Borderline Mountain, Bing Yuan suppressed the impulse in his heart and did not ask. He only felt that it was a pity for the 100 billion supreme grade divine crystals that he could easily obtain. Jianqin and Bing Yuan returned to the 5th hall and sat on the throne that symbolized the 5th hall master. Jianqin's eyes flickered, and then he looked in the direction of the 7th hall. He released his consciousness and extended it towards the 7th hall without any concealment. In the 7th divine hall, the 7th hall master, Deity, was sitting boldly on the main seat, frowning as if he was hesitating about something. He already knew what had happened in the 100 Saints city. At the same time, he also knew that the dozens of factions that had been abandoned by Kuan Tian in the 100 Saints city were preparing more than 100 billion supreme grade divine crystals to seek shelter. In the face of such a huge amount of divine crystals, Deity found it difficult to remain calm. He was extremely tempted because if the 7th hall had this amount of divine crystals, they would be able to completely solve their current urgent needs. However, in his heart, he was already wary of Kuan Tian, especially after the battle between Kuan Tian and Owen 3 days ago. This wariness became even stronger. Suddenly, Deity's expression changed, and his face instantly became cold. He said coldly to the space in front of him, Kuan Tian, your consciousness has invaded the 7th hall for no reason. What do you want? I'm naturally here to make a deal with you. Jianchen's consciousness descended on the 7th divine hall, and he directly communicated with Jia Di through voice transmission. A deal? What deal is there between us to talk about? Jia Di's expression was cold, and his tone was also extremely cold, as if he was unapproachable. Indeed, the 7th hall and the 5th hall had always been fighting. This kind of open and covert struggle had been going on for countless years, so there was no such thing as a deal. Of course, I know that the divine crystals in your 7th hall can't sustain the herb garden for more than a few days. Once the energy supply of the herb garden can't be met and the 7th hall's breakthrough will be affected. The 7th hall can't afford the consequences, Jianchen said slowly. Jia Di frowned and snorted coldly. Although the 7th hall doesn't have a lot of divine crystals in storage, it's far from enough that the herb garden can't be met. Moreover, the forces that cooperate with the 7th hall are constantly sending us divine crystals every day. The herb garden area that the 7th hall is in charge of is not for the 5th hall to tell you what to do. Those divine crystals are far from enough to provide the energy needed for the Tao fruit's breakthrough. Jia Di, don't deceive yourself. Jianchen smiled faintly and said, However, there is an opportunity for the 7th hall to not have to worry about the lack of divine crystals at all. From now on, the 5th hall will be fully responsible for providing the 7th hall with all the divine crystals needed for the herb garden until the Tao fruit matures. Jia Di's eyes flashed. This time he didn't immediately refuse Jianchen's proposal. Instead, he sat on the throne silently for a moment before he finally said expressionlessly, Then what price do you want me to pay? Price? Not really. It's just a matter of a few words for you. You don't need to pay anything. Jianchen withdrew the senses of his soul. He could not help but smile mysteriously as he sat on the throne of the 5th hall. He said to Bing Yuan, From today onwards, all of the divine crystals in the 7th hall's medicinal garden will be provided by our 5th hall. W.H. What? Bing Yuan, who was standing below, had a look of disbelief on his face. At the same time, an order came from the 7th hall. The vice leader of the 7th hall, Enlai, who is a 4th heavenly layer infinite prime, personally led the 2 armies of the Dark Star race towards the 100 Saint City in a grand fashion. They did not move quickly, so the 100 Saint City received the news along the way. It immediately caused the people of the 100 Saint City to panic. Oh no. The Dark Star race has launched a large-scale invasion. This time, they're being led by a 4th heavenly layer infinite prime. It's the people of the 7th hall. It's over. Are they planning on destroying our 100 Saint City? Don't panic. We've already received the protection of the 5th hall. Immediately send people to request reinforcements from the 5th hall. Chapter 2900. The entire 100 Saint City was enveloped in a heavy atmosphere. Even the several dozen organizations under the protection of the 5th Divine Hall felt uneasy. They began to suspect that something had happened to the upper echelon of the Dark Star race, such that the protection of the 5th Divine Hall was no longer effective. Otherwise, why would a 4th heavenly layer infinite prime personally lead 2 armies to 100 Saint City in such an aggressive manner? While the entire 100 Saint City was on high alert, the 2 Dark Star legions, led by Enlai, finally arrived at the 100 Saint City. Shortly after, the legions began to disperse, forming a huge encirclement that surrounded the entire 100 Saint City. Seeing the formation of the Dark Star race, all the major forces in the 100 Saint City changed their expression. The 2 legions of the Dark Star race had actually surrounded the 100 Saint City. Clearly, they were planning to capture a turtle in a jar, not letting anyone escape. The current situation was extremely unfavorable to 100 Saint City. This was because they were facing a 4th heavenly layer infinite prime. Before an expert like that, the protective formations of 100 Saint City could only last for a few days. Once they ran out of energy, Hundred Saints City would fall apart. On the tall city walls of the Hundred Saints City, numerous prodigies were lined up in a row. The Jade Pill Sex prodigy, who had promised to receive the eternal protection of the Fifth Hall Master, could be said to be the one with the most confidence. He stood proudly and loudly shouted toward the outside of the city. Vice Hall Master-in-Law, the Fifth Divine Hall's Earth Sky Hall Master, has already promised to protect us so that we won't be targeted or oppressed by any Dark Star Race forces in the Dark Star Realm. However, you've led an army to surround our Hundred Saints City. And Lai hovered in the air. He was several dozen meters taller than Hundred Saints City. He looked down on the city while the commanders of the two armies stood behind him politely. And Lai smiled warmly when he heard what the prodigy of the Jade Pill sect had said. He said, "You don't need to worry. We naturally won't touch any organization that is protected by the Fifth Hall Master. However, not all organizations in Hundred Saints City are protected by the Fifth Hall Master." Hearing this, the factions that were protected in the Hundred Saints City immediately breathed a sigh of relief, while the factions that were not protected paled. They had already realized that the Seventh Divine Hall had mobilized such a large number of people and was clearly targeting them. At this time, Anlai's voice continued, "Many of our people have died at your hands. Even if we kill you all, it will be difficult to wash away this hatred. However, since some of you are under the protection of the Fifth Temple Master, we naturally have to give face to the Fifth Temple Master. We won't touch you for the next 500 years, but the rest of you, we, the Seventh Temple, will not let go of you. I'll give you 3 days to consider. If you don't remove the formation after 3 days, I'll have no choice but to break this formation myself. We, the Seventh Palace, have already given the Fifth Palace Master Face. If you really force me to take action because of your defensive formation, even if the Fifth Palace Master comes personally, he will have nothing to say." The two armies of the Dark Star race besieged Hundred Saints City for 3 days. At the last moment of the 3-day period, Hundred Saints City finally removed the defensive formation. The entire Hundred Saints City was in a completely defenseless state. However, when Jia Di led the army into Hundred Saints City, the forces stationed in Hundred Saints City had been reduced by 1/3. Only the 51 organizations under the protection of the Fifth Temple Master remained in Hundred Saints City. The rest of the organizations, including the Heavenly Thunder Clan, had all evacuated and left through the transmission formation set up inside Hundred Saints City. And Lai had clearly expected such an outcome, so he did not find it strange at all. He only walked around the Hundred Saints City symbolically before leaving. However, before he left, he muttered to himself, "What is Kuan Tian trying to do? Now I really can't figure out his thoughts." The Fifth Palace, reporting to Palace Master. Deputy Palace Master and Lai of the Seventh Palace has led the army into Hundred Saints City. However, the organizations in Hundred Saints City that are not under the protection of the Palace Master have already left. Deputy Palace Master and Lai found nothing and is returning with the army. A divine king knelt down with his head deeply buried in the ground and reported respectfully, "You may leave." Jianchen sat on the throne and said softly, "Yes, Palace Master." After the subordinate left, Jianchen, who was sitting on the throne, let out a long sigh of relief and muttered to himself, "They finally left. This is good too. I have less to worry about." The Seventh Palace kept their promise. Well, the energy of the divine crystals in the herb garden area that the Seventh Palace is in charge of seems to be running out. The same goes for the Sixth Palace. I have to replenish it. Afterwards, Jianchen did not take anyone with him. Instead, he went to the area where the herb garden was through a teleportation formation alone. The herb garden was a secret among the Dark Star race. Only primordial realm experts had the right to know about its existence. The divine crystals that the Dark Star race had obtained from the cultivators of the outside world were all used to nurture the herb garden. Arriving in the herb garden, Jianqin discovered that basically the entire garden was drizzling. The rain was not a natural rain. Instead, it was completely condensed from pure energy. At this moment, the density of the energy in the herb garden was 100 times denser than the last time he had been here. It might even be more than 100 times denser. Of course, such dense energy was only distributed along the edges of the garden. The closer it was to the center, the thinner the energy would be. This was because the central region was where the Tao birth fruit grew. At this moment, as far as the eye could see, the region where the Tao birth fruit was located had already formed a vacuum. Not a single trace of energy could linger in this region for even a moment. It was in a critical period of transforming into a high-grade god fruit. The amount of energy it required to advance was extremely tremendous. At the same time, it absorbed energy at an extremely shocking rate. It had already absorbed all the energy in the region, leaving nothing behind. Even though new energy poured in endlessly from all directions, it was completely absorbed in a single moment. Jianqin went to the regions that the 5th Divine Hall, 4th Divine Hall, and 7th Divine Hall were in charge of first. He tossed out several tens of billions of supreme grade divine crystals in one go, filling up the divine crystal reserves of the 3 regions. Only then did he stop and observe the situation of the fruit of ways from afar. The central region where the fruit of ways grew was protected by an even more powerful formation. The formation had been personally cast down by the Dark Star Emperor. It could completely block the attacks of 9th Heavenly Layer Infinite Primes. Of course, due to the limited supply of energy, the formation would only be able to block a few attacks from experts of that level. The fruit of ways should be close to ripening. It's just a pity that I can't predict when it will ripen with my ability. I wonder if the Heavenly Thunder Clan can find 30 jades with the laws of time for me. If I have those jades, I'll be able to completely control when the fruit of ways ripens. Jianqin stared at the fruit of ways with undisguised desire. Chapter 2901. If I ingest a high-grade reproductive fruit of ways when I'm in 9th Heavenly Layer Infinite Prime, there's an 80% chance for me to become a chaotic prime. A high-grade reproductive fruit of ways is enough to nurture a chaotic prime. The reproductive fruit of ways right now is a mid-grade reproductive fruit of ways. As a result, it can only allow a peak divine king to become an infinite prime. Although I'm still quite a distance away from becoming a chaotic prime with my current level of cultivation, a mid-grade reproductive fruit of ways is still a little lacking if I want to break through with my laws of the sword. As a result, I can only wait for the reproductive fruit of ways to become a high-grade divine fruit of ways. Only then will I have complete confidence in breaking through. In Jianqin's eyes, the reproductive fruit of ways that the Dark Star race had nurtured for several tens of millions of years was already his. Even though the reproductive fruit of ways was enveloped by powerful formations and had a warning function, the Dark Star Emperor would know as soon as the formations were attacked or anything happened. It would take time for the Dark Star Emperor to arrive. However, it would take time for Dark Star Great Emperor to get here. Even though it wouldn't take too long, he had the ability to tear through the formation here and seize the Tao birth fruit before Dark Star Great Emperor arrived. Dark Star race, since you've taken away Siyu's essence blood so cruelly and even want to sacrifice Siyu, don't blame me for being vicious, Jianqin thought. A sliver of coldness flashed through his eyes at that moment. In the following period of time, Jianqin did not pay any attention to the matters of the 100 Saint City. After He Qianqian, Jinhong, and how Jia's people all retreated from the 100 Saint City, he no longer cared about them. As for the divine halls that were opposing them, they didn't point fingers at the 100 Saint City anymore because all the hall masters had seen how determined Kuan-Tian was to protect the 100 Saint City. In front of benefits that were huge enough to make them dizzy, none of them wanted to anger the 5th hall master for a few divine gems and then engage in a meaningless life and death battle with the crazy 5th hall master. Moreover, Kuan-Tian's strength had already surpassed most of the leaders. apart from the leader of the first hall, who was a seventh heavenly layer infinite prime. There was basically no one else who could suppress him. In the past few days, Jianqin remained in a secret room. He did nothing else. Instead, he put on an act and took out the Divine King's grass to study. In the past, he had used the excuse of studying the Divine King's grass to ask for a large amount of Divine King's grass from the 10 divine halls. In order to avoid suspicion, he naturally had to put on an act. Otherwise, if he just took the Divine King's grass and ancestral sacred earth from the 10 divine halls and did nothing, it would be far too obvious of a scam. It would be very easy for him to raise suspicion. Of course, he contacted the other divine halls again and asked for even more ancestral sacred earth. However, ancestral sacred earth was different from Divine King's grass. High Divine King's grass could not be sold to outside cultivators, and the 10 divine halls did not have much use for it. As a result, they would not suffer any losses, even if they gave it all to him. However, ancestral sacred earth was different. Not only was it even rarer than Divine King's grass, but it could also be sold to outside cultivators for a tremendous sum of supreme grade divine crystals. If the divine halls did not have enough divine crystals to supply their gardens, they would basically give away some ancestral sacred earth. Bingyuan, tell all the divine halls that I still need a large amount of ancestral sacred earth for my research on the Divine King's grass. I'll use 500 million supreme, grade, divine crystals for 1 tael of ancestral sacred earth. With no other choice, Jianqin could only use divine crystals to make the purchase. He had just obtained a tremendous amount of supreme, grade, divine crystals from the 100 Saint City, so he was basically as wealthy as an empire. Even after using them to maintain the medicinal gardens of the 3 divine halls, he still had quite a lot left. Moreover, these divine crystals would only be of unimaginable value to the Dark Star race that was in dire need of divine crystals. Once they were taken to the Saints' world, their value would plummet. This was because many precious heavenly resources could not be purchased with divine crystals in the Saints' world. Basically, they had to be exchanged with treasures of the same value. Ancestral sacred earth just happened to be one of those treasures. Even if they could be purchased with divine crystals, most of them would be colored divine crystals, and they would be extremely expensive as well. Bingyuan quickly passed on Jianqin's words to the 9 remaining divine halls. Aside from the 4th and 7th divine halls who no longer needed to worry about the energy of their gardens, the remaining 7 basically all took out some ancestral sacred earth to exchange with Jianqin. Each of the 7 divine halls took out a different amount of ancestral sacred earth. Altogether, it was 35 taels of ancestral sacred earth. Only 35 taels of ancestral sacred earth? That's not enough. It looks like they value the ancestral sacred earth far more than the Divine King grass. Jianqin was not satisfied with this because just the 5th divine hall had a storage of 1.5 kilograms. The other 7 divine halls only managed to gather 1.5 kilograms. This amount was nowhere near what he had expected. Bingyuan, tell the other divine halls that the Emperor has personally ordered that the 10 divine halls should provide their full support for everything I need when researching the Divine King grass. However, I will need an extremely large amount of ancestral sacred earth when researching the Divine King grass. Just this alone is nowhere near enough. I'm only willing to use divine crystals to exchange with them because everyone is in dire need of divine crystals due to my breakthrough. If they miss out on this, they won't have a single divine crystal when I provide them with ancestral sacred earth in the future. Tell them not to miss out on this great opportunity. There's also the 4th and 7th divine halls. They must provide a portion of ancestral sacred earth as well. Researching the Divine King grass is a matter of utmost importance to all the upper echelons of our race. No one can stay out of this. They must contribute. Yes, Divine Hall Master. I'll pass on the message to the 9 divine halls right away. Bingyuan accepted the order and immediately left. After Bingyuan left, Jianqin became rather worried as he sat in the secret room. He suddenly remembered that the Dark Star clan still had the strange and unfathomable Tianqing. He did not know if his actions would attract Tianqing's attention. It's rather risky. However, something as precious as the ancestral sacred earth is worth the risk. Also, it's been so many days and the Dark Star Emperor still hasn't done anything. Tianqing is also very elusive. He probably doesn't know my true identity, thought Bing Yuan. At the same time, he made up his mind to lay low for a period of time until the day of the grand ceremony. 2 days later, Jianqin exchanged 500 million supreme, grade, divine crystals for 6 kilograms of ancestral sacred earth from the 9 divine halls. He had also paid 35 billion supreme, grade, divine crystals for it. The extra 5 billion all ended up in the hands of the 10th Hall Master, Feng Shui. Now, Jianqin possessed 7.5 kilograms of ancestral sacred earth. This was enough to satisfy Jianqin. Of course, the Dark Star clan did not only have high-quality divine king grass and ancestral sacred earth. There were a few other precious materials that could only be produced by the Dark Star clan. However, compared to the ancestral sacred earth, they paled in comparison. In order to avoid suspicion, Jianqin completely lay low after collecting enough ancestral sacred earth. He did not try to obtain any other rare materials. Chapter 2902. It's a pity that I'm still not a match for Dark Star the Great with my current strength, unless my Swordway realm breaks through to the middle stage Sword Immortal realm. Jianqin's eyes gradually brightened. The middle stage Sword Immortal realm was both difficult and simple. If one were to comprehend it normally, it would naturally be difficult to break through. It would require opportunities, a lot of comprehension, and the accumulation of time. However, if he had a divine level high-grade Dao fruit, it would be extremely easy for his Swordway comprehension to break through from the early stage Sword Immortal realm to the middle stage Sword Immortal realm. It seems that I'm determined to get this Dao fruit. Another 7 days passed in the blink of an eye. During this day, Jianqin, who had been fiddling with the divine king grass in the secret chamber, finally received a piece of good news. Late June of the Heavenly Thunder clan did not disappoint. He returned to the 100 Saint City with 30 jades containing the law of time. The 30 pure white jades were placed in a box and sent to Jianqin. As soon as he received it, Jianqin could not wait to open the jade box. The 30 jades lay quietly inside. Inside them, there was an extremely pure law of time power. At first glance, Jianqin discovered that the 30 jades were exactly the same as the 3 that Lei Jun had taken out in the Pantheon. Even the law of time was the same. Great, this is great. With these jades, I can make the Dao fruit ripen at any time. Jianqin was secretly overjoyed. He had already prepared all the energy he needed to break through, and the remaining time would be taken care of by the 30 jades. In his eyes, the fruit had already become an item that he could easily obtain. Men, send 1 tael of ancestral sacred land to the Heavenly Thunder clan of the 100 Saint City. This is what I promised. Since they have fulfilled my request, I will naturally not treat them unfairly. In addition, send 1,000 low-grade divine king grass to the Heavenly Thunder clan. Jianqin was in a good mood and directly rewarded the Heavenly Thunder clan with 1,000 divine king grass. Time quietly passed. Jianqin waited in silence. Finally, half a month later, the hall masters of the 10 great divine halls received the exact date of the great ritual. The day of the great sacrifice was set to be 3 months later. Not long after the specific date of the great sacrifice was confirmed, the temple masters of the 10 divine halls were summoned by the Dark Star Emperor again. Thus, the 10 temple masters and all the deputy temple masters gathered in the Dark Star divine hall again. The amount of divine king realm life sucking beast corpses required for the great ritual is far from enough. Relying on the cultivators from the outside world to hunt them down in Two World Mountain is simply too late. Hence, In order to collect enough life-sucking beast corpses as soon as possible, the Emperor has decided to lead all of you into Two-World Mountain. The Dark Star Emperor sat cross-legged on his throne like a lofty mountain. His tone was filled with unquestionable majesty. The Hall Masters and Deputy Temple Masters all looked at each other when they heard that. At that moment, all of them had no idea whether to laugh or cry. They all possessed esteemed statuses in the Darkstar race, yet they had never thought that a measly divine king realm life-sucking beast corpses would require all of them to come out and kill their way into Two-World Mountain. This was something that had never happened in the history of the Darkstar world. As the great ritual this time is different from the past, not only do we need a large number of divine king realm life-sucking beast corpses, but we also need the corpse of a primordial realm life-sucking beast. We need to gather all of these corpses within half a month, the Darkstar Emperor continued. He was stern and serious, which meant that he was not joking. He had truly decided to lead all the primordial realm experts into Two-World Mountain to hunt down the divine king realm life-sucking beast. The expressions of the various hall masters and deputy temple masters all changed slightly when they heard about the corpse of a primordial realm life-sucking beast. Once the Darkstar clansmen entered Two-World Mountain, not only would they be heavily suppressed, unable to unleash their full strength, but even the slightest leak of their presence would alarm all the primordial realm life-sucking beasts in Two-World Mountain in a single instance, causing them to be surrounded and attacked. Once a battle broke out in Two-World Mountain, not only would they be suppressed, but they would also be unable to recover their energy. Their vitality would be constantly devoured by the life-sucking beasts. On the other hand, the life-sucking beasts were protected by the special environment of Two-World Mountain. Not only did they possess almost endless power, but they could also recover in an extremely short amount of time, no matter how severe their wounds were. As a result, the gap between the two sides, which were originally similar in strength, was pulled apart without any limit. As a result, a huge gap had appeared between the two sides, where it was basically impossible to make up for. As a result, all the hall masters and deputy temple masters became rather stern when they heard that they were going to hunt down primordial realm life-sucking beasts in Two-World Mountain. Killing a low-level region lord life-sucking beast isn't difficult for the Emperor. Just leave it to the Emperor. All you need to do is try your best to kill as many divine king life-sucking beasts as possible. The Darkstar Emperor spoke casually. His expression did not change at all when he mentioned killing primordial realm life-sucking beasts, as if he was talking about something insignificant. However, Genshin understood that the Darkstar Emperor did possess the strength to do so. When the Darkstar Emperor entered Two-World Mountain last time, he had already demonstrated a strength that could suppress everything. If he suddenly launched a sneak attack on a low-level life-sucking beast, he could indeed kill it in a single strike and then retreat with ease. The next morning, Genshin set off with the Darkstar Emperor with the 3 Vice Temple Masters of the 5th Hall, Bingyuan, Taluo, and Doujin, as well as all the primordial realm experts from the other 9 halls. Their division of labor was very clear. First, the Darkstar Emperor would attract the attention of all the primordial realm life-sucking beasts, while the remaining hall masters and vice temple masters would scatter in search of divine king life-sucking beasts to hunt. Immediately, booms rang out from the depths of Two-World Mountain. Great beast roars constantly rang out. The Darkstar Emperor's presence completely erupted, making him seem like a dazzling sun in Two-World Mountain. He immediately attracted the attention of all the primordial realm life-sucking beasts. This time, the Darkstar Emperor did not fight the primordial realm life-sucking beasts like last time. Instead, he used a movement technique to draw the primordial realm life-sucking beasts around in the depths of Two-World Mountain. In this way, his energy consumption would be reduced, and the time he could spend in the Two-World Mountain would naturally be extended. The hall masters and vice temple masters of the 10 halls scattered across the depths of Two-World Mountain. They slaughtered the divine king life-sucking beasts as quickly and quietly as possible. Chapter 2903. The hunt lasted for a total of 7 days. During that time, countless divine king, realm, life-devouring beasts had died in the depths of the Two-World Mountain. The past few days were definitely the darkest days Two-World Mountain had ever experienced since it was formed. This was because the Two-World Mountain had never lost so many life-devouring beasts in its long history. Moreover, all of them were divine king, realm, life-devouring beasts. After a few days of hunting, the experts of the 10 divine halls found it more and more difficult to find divine king, realm, life-devouring beasts. When they had first entered the two worlds, they had expanded the senses of their souls. Even though their range had been greatly reduced, they would still be able to discover several god-king, life-devouring beasts at the very least within the range of the senses of their souls. But now, if they wanted to find a living, life-devouring beast, they would have to spend a very long time and travel a very long distance before they could find one. It was as if all the divine king realm, life-devouring beasts in the entire Two-World Mountain had been hunted down in just 7 days. At this moment, a great bellow suddenly rang out from the depths of the Two-World Mountain. It was the Dark Star Emperor's voice. It really did seem like the furious roar of a chaotic prime. The terrifying sound waves were extremely penetrative, spreading across the entire Two-World Mountain with enough power to pierce through stone. The primordial realm experts, scattered across the various regions of the Two-World Mountain, stopped their search when they heard the Dark Star Emperor's bellow. Without any hesitation, they immediately flew out as quickly as they could. The Dark Star Emperor has ordered a retreat. Looks like he's almost at his limit. However, the Dark Star Emperor is extremely impressive to be able to fight against so many primordial realm, life-devouring beasts for so long in an environment where energy can't recover. Jianqin stared in the Dark Star Emperor's direction before retreating as well. Although the mist in the depths of the Two-World Mountain shrouded the sky and the landscape changed from time to time, it was extremely easy to get lost. However, to the Dark Star clansmen, the world where the Dark Star realm was located was the best guiding light. Because of that, they would not get lost in the depths of the Two-Realm Mountain, no matter how astonishing the changes in the terrain were. Although Jianqin was not a member of the Dark Star race and was unable to sense the world of the Dark Star realm, he had already left behind an obscure imprint outside. Thus, he did not have to worry about not being able to find the way out. Primordial realm experts moved extremely quickly, basically traversing 1,000 kilometers in a single instance. As a result, in just 4 hours, all the Hall Lords and Vice Hall Lords left Two-World Mountain and gathered in the territory of the Dark Star race. It's been a long time since our clan had such a big operation. This time, I'm sure all the divine king realm life-sucking beasts in Two-World Mountain will be wiped out. Yes, even if they didn't all die, there won't be many left. I just feel that it's overkill to kill these life-devouring beasts that are only at the divine king realm with our strength. There's nothing we can do about that. Due to the restrictions on their strength, killing a divine king realm life-sucking beast is extremely difficult. Who knows when we'll be able to rely on them? On the other hand, the divine king realm clansmen of our clan are basically reduced to food for the life-sucking beasts after their strength is restricted. As a result, we can only hunt down a large number of divine king realm life-sucking beasts in a short amount of time. The primordial realm experts conversed casually together. Many of them were rather out of breath. In particular, the weaker primordial realm experts like Bing Yuan were slightly pale. The 7 days of hunting had exhausted them to varying degrees. The weaker they were, the more exhausted they would be. A vigorous aura rapidly approached from the Two-World Mountain. The Dark Star Emperor was the last to come out. His hair was messy, and there was a hint of fatigue between his brows. His clothes were also torn in many places. He looked a bit wasteful. However, he was not injured at all. Although everyone had left Two-World Mountain, it did not calm down because of that. The primordial realm life-sucking beasts discovered that their clansmen had been hunted down in large numbers in their territories. so they all roared out furiously. As the ground shook, they surged over from the depths, gathering at the edge of Two World Mountain in the end. Their huge eyes flickered in and out of the mist, shining with fury and hatred. However, they seemed to be afraid, not daring to leave the range of Two World Mountain. These bastards aren't stupid. They don't dare to set foot in our territory. Standing outside the Two World Mountain, a Vice Hall master sneered. After leaving the Two World Mountain, he was no longer afraid of the life-sucking beasts. Humph! If we set foot in Two World Mountain, we'll be suppressed by the senses of the Grand Exalt of the Wood Spirit clan. However, if they dare to enter our territory, they will similarly be suppressed by the Tao perception of our ancestors. Not only will they be unable to display their full strength, even recovering from their injuries will become extremely difficult. At that time, killing this group of bastards will truly be as easy as flipping our hands. Another Vice Hall master spoke, and his eyes were filled with provocation. Instead of describing the Darkstar race and Two World Mountain as two different regions, it was more accurate to describe it as the territories of the grand exalts of the two races in the past. No matter which side set foot in the territory of the Darkstar race or the life-sucking beasts, they would be suppressed, causing their strength to plummet. If it weren't for the existence of a supreme figure like the Darkstar Emperor in this generation, they probably wouldn't have been able to set foot in Two World Mountain and kill so many divine king realm life-sucking beasts today. Jianchen saw the crux of the problem, as he discovered that the primordial realm life-sucking beasts in Two World Mountain seemed to form a rough balance with the primordial realm experts of the Darkstar race. Even if there was a difference, it was not by much. It was not just their numbers, but their strength as well. The Darkstar clan had the Darkstar Emperor, a 9th heavenly layer infinite prime, while the Two World Mountain also had a 9th heavenly layer infinite prime life devouring beast. There seemed to be a balance between the two, but it also seemed like they were restricting each other. The reason why the balance was broken was because the Darkstar Emperor was just too powerful. They were both 9th heavenly layer infinite primes. Yet he could venture into the depths of the Two World Mountains and fend off all the primordial realm, life-devouring beasts by himself. The 9th heavenly layer infinite prime, life-devouring beast from the Two World Mountain was unable to do anything to the Darkstar Emperor. However, at the same time, the Darkstar Emperor clearly did not possess the ability to kill the 9th heavenly layer infinite prime in Two World Mountain. In Jianchen's opinion, the current situation between the Two World Mountain and the Darkstar race seemed more like a continuation of the grievances between the Grand Exalts of the Wood Spirit and Grand Exalts of the Darkstar race. Check the life-sucking beasts and see if there are enough for sacrifice, said the Darkstar Emperor. At that moment, he seemed to have become a huge vortex, devouring the essence of the sun and moon. He rapidly absorbed the energy of the world to recover at a speed that completely exceeded what 9th heavenly layer infinite primes should have. Chapter 2904. Afterwards, everyone began to tally up the life-devouring beasts in their space rings. After 7 days of hunting, the several dozen primordial realm experts had obtained over 50,000 divine, king realm life-devouring beasts. On average, each person had killed over 1,000 life-devouring beasts. Of course, this was only an average. In reality, the leaders of the 10 sacred halls had killed the most life-devouring beasts. Not only were they the most powerful, but the senses of their souls covered a greater area as well. They possessed an advantage in both hunting and searching. As for the weaker vice leaders, such as Bing Yuan, who was a first heavenly layer infinite prime, they naturally killed much fewer life-devouring beasts. There were even some vice leaders who were no more powerful than peak divine king realm life-devouring beasts after being suppressed by the Two World Mountain due to their weaker strength. After 7 days of hunting, they had all suffered some wounds that were not particularly heavy. Even a small portion of their vitality had been devoured. 50,000? That's more than enough. The Darkstar Emperor muttered. He then led everyone back to the imperial city of the Dark Star race. As soon as they returned, all the leaders and vice leaders entered seclusion, including the Dark Star Emperor. They were unable to recover any energy during the 7 days of hunting in the Two-World Mountain, so they were extremely drained. They were all recovering as quickly as they could. However, although they had left, the Two-World Mountain remained in an uproar. Perhaps it was because too many divine king realm life-devouring beasts had died this time, but the primordial realm life-devouring beasts in the Two-World Mountain gathered at the border between the Two-World Mountain and the Dark Star World, refusing to leave for a very long time. Their colossal figures were hidden in the mist as they constantly roared out furiously, alarming all the cultivators and Dark Star clansmen in the surroundings. It was as if they were afraid that the terrifying primordial realm life-devouring beasts would charge out and slaughter them. This matter caused a huge uproar in the Dark Star world. There were even some Dark Star clansmen who did not know what had happened, so they reported the strange happenings in the Two-World Mountain to the 10 sacred halls in fear and trepidation. After 7 days, the primordial realm life-devouring beasts finally dispersed. Very soon, the Two-World Mountain returned to peace. However, on the 2nd day of peace, the Dark Star Emperor, the supreme expert of the Dark Star race, hid his presence and silently entered the depths of Two-World Mountain. Before long, a miserable cry rang out from the depths of the Two-World Mountain. It was filled with despair and fear, as if it was the sound of a final struggle before death. As the scream rang out, the powerful presence of the Dark Star race rapidly expanded in Two-World Mountain. In an instant, it filled the entire mountain range. Immediately, the Two-World Mountain that had just calmed down fell into chaos again. The primordial realm, life-devouring beasts hidden everywhere, roared out furiously as they gathered from all directions furiously. However, when they arrived at the scene of the incident, the owner of the territory was nowhere to be found, only leaving behind a ground full of green blood. As the day of the great ritual drew closer and closer, the entire Dark Star race was clearly busier than usual. Some of the sharper people could even sense a sacred and heavy atmosphere, silently enveloping the entire royal capital. The various preparations for the day of the great ritual were handled by people from the Dark Star Divine Hall, including the construction of the altar, the preparation of the offerings, and so on. These trivial matters did not require the 10 divine halls to deal with them. The several tens of thousands of divine king life-devouring beasts that had been killed had all been taken away. The people in charge of the great ritual would deal with them further. Moreover, even the essence blood of the divine beasts that had been distributed to the 10 divine halls and all the cities of the Dark Star race had been taken away by the Dark Star Emperor after they had been completely converted. They were going to be used on the day of the great ritual. The 100 Saint City and all the cultivators in the outside world were under the strict supervision of the Dark Star race. Out of the 10 armies of the Dark Star race, one of them personally stood guard in the 100 Saint City. At the same time, all the people in the city were restricted from leaving. This time, as the protector of the 100 Saint City, the 5th Hall Master did not stand up for the 100 Saint City because this order came from the Dark Star Emperor. Obviously, in the eyes of the Dark Star Emperor, although the 100 Saint City's strength was much weaker than the Dark Star Emperor's and it was impossible for them to have any influence on the Great Ritual, the Great Ritual this time was really too important. In the process of the Great Ritual, the slightest mistake was not allowed. The Dark Star Emperor's action was obviously to eliminate all possible hidden dangers. In addition to the 100 Saint City, all the cultivators from the outside world who were active in the Dark Star realm were all locked up in their respective cities. The Dark Star race adopted a method of confinement for these people. From now on, until the end of the Great Ritual, no cultivator from the outside world could leave their city. At the same time, the Dark Star race sent out many divine King Realm experts to form patrol squads. They patrolled the entire territory of the Dark Star race. As soon as they discovered any cultivators from the outside world, they would forcefully imprison them in the nearby cities. Anyone who did not cooperate would be killed without mercy. The actions of the Dark Star race immediately caused all the cultivators in the outside world to panic. Even though all the cultivators who had been confined could still move about in the city, they were all uneasy. Their hearts were in turmoil. They had no idea what had happened to the Dark Star race. A small number of well-informed cultivators from the outside world found it difficult to calm down when they learned that the Dark Star race was preparing for the grand ceremony. They were unsure whether the Dark Star race had confined them in the city to prevent them from causing trouble, or if there was some other purpose to it. I've heard that some demonic cultivators in the Saints' world will slaughter large numbers of people when they carry out certain rituals. Do you think the Dark Star race captured us one by one and brought us to the city to use the Devil Path's methods to sacrifice us? As rumors spread everywhere, and coupled with the Dark Star race's confinement methods, more and more people believed that the Dark Star race wanted to sacrifice them. This immediately caused all the cultivators in the outside world to despair. They felt like they were doomed. However, not everyone was willing to accept their fate. As the saying went, wherever there was oppression, there would be resistance. After being confined like prisoners by the Dark Star race, a few cultivators from the outside world finally began to band together and prepare to resist. This immediately caused the city lords of the various cities to feel troubled. Although most of the cultivators from the outside world were not powerful, with only a small portion of them being at the Divine King realm, there were many of them. Although they were unable to pose a threat to the guards of any city, they were still a problem. If it were any other time, such a small matter would not be a problem at all. They could deal with it with a raise of their hand, but right now was the crucial day of the great ritual. At such a sensitive time, any unstable factor could be magnified infinitely. The Emperor has given strict orders that we are not to kill the cultivators from the outside world in the cities, or we really want to kill them all and get rid of them once and for all. Many city lords sighed in the 36 cities of the Dark Star race. The cultivators from the outside world in the cities seemed to have lost control. Naturally, the 7th Divine Hall, who was responsible for all matters of the Dark Star race, learned about it. As a result, the Hall Master of the 7th Divine Hall personally visited the Dark Star Divine Hall to seek an audience with the Dark Star Emperor. He proposed to kill all the cultivators from the outside world and eliminate all potential threats. Chapter 2905. Yes, Emperor. Jia-di replied politely before immediately going to pass on the Emperor's orders. Jia-di was filled with doubt about the Dark Star Emperor's attitude towards the cultivators of the outside world. However, the Dark Star Emperor possessed supreme authority within the Dark Star race. As long as it was an order from the Dark Star Emperor, no one dared to oppose or question it. Even if someone believed the Dark Star Emperor's orders to be wrong, they would still carry out the wrong orders. However, when the Dark Star Great Emperor's decree, which was more like a promise, was passed through the 7th Divine Hall to the ears of the outer world cultivators who were grounded in the 36 main cities, the nervous outer world cultivators calmed down one after another. Even the momentum of joining forces to form a desperate counterattack was temporarily disintegrated. There really were not many cultivators who doubted the Dark Star Emperor's promise. Although none of them had personally seen the Dark Star Emperor before, many of them still trusted the Dark Star Emperor's credibility. So it's just a false alarm. Like I said, the Dark Star Emperor won't do anything to us. Nor will they actually dare to harm us. After all, we basically represent half of the organizations in the Saints' world. If the Dark Star Emperor really tries to wipe out our alliance, the great sovereign of our Saints' world will definitely take action to wipe out the Dark Star Emperor. That's right. If the great sovereign of our Saints' world takes action, the Dark Star Emperor will have no chance of surviving. Offending the 100 Saint City is already the limit of what the Dark Star Emperor can do. After all, the 100 Saint City is only an alliance of several dozen organizations in the Saints' world. Behind us, there are countless sects and organizations. Similar discussions rang out everywhere in the Dark Star race. In particular, when the cultivators of the outside world mentioned the great sovereign, they showed undisguised arrogance. When they glanced past the Darkstar clansmen beside them, they all showed faint disdain. A relatively large portion of the cultivators of the outside world possessed backgrounds in the Saints' world. Even though the organizations behind them could not compare to the 100 Saint City, there were quite a few of them who possessed low-level Grand Primes. Moreover, there were an extremely small number of them. The sects and organizations behind them were on par with the 100 holy cities in the Saints' world, or even greater than most of them. Merely, those powers did not participate in the construction of the 100 holy cities. Naturally, they did not form an alliance with the powers behind the 100 holy cities. They existed by themselves in the Darkstar realm. As a result, the Grand Exalt was a supreme existence that no ordinary expert in the Saints' world knew about. It was no secret to a portion of them. Not only will it not harm our lives, but it will also guarantee that all of us can leave this place alive. That's a little too much information. Is the Darkstar Emperor playing a word game with us? At the same time, the remaining 52 organizations had gathered in the Pantheon in the 100 Saint City. They were discussing the current situation of the Darkstar race. Isn't that so? For example, they would beat us half dead and throw us out, or make us leave with missing arms and legs. In the end, they would leave alive without harming our lives. The Darkstar Emperor only said that he wouldn't harm our lives, but he didn't say that he wouldn't harm us at all. That's right. Not harming our lives and not harming us at all are two completely different concepts. Coupled with the fact that the Darkstar race has imprisoned so many cultivators of the Saints' world in the 36 cities and sealed off the teleportation formations to prevent them from leaving, there must be some sort of unspeakable scheme hidden within. Many organizations analyzed the situation in the Pantheon of the 100 Saint City. However, the people who spoke were not the leading prodigies of the various organizations. Instead, they were the old servants who followed the prodigies. At this moment, the old servants acted as the brains of the various organizations, coming up with plans for their young masters. They were indeed people in this aspect. They were not powerful, but they were quite intelligent. They managed all the businesses of their clans in the Darkstar race. Young master, for safety's sake, you should leave the Darkstar race as soon as possible, said an old servant. The clan sent me to the Darkstar race to train me. If I choose to retreat just because of some rumors and your wild guesses, how will I have the face to fight for the position of young master in the future? The prodigy said stubbornly. He was fearless. We have to be on guard against this. Why don't we do this? Send someone to charge the teleportation formation with energy so that it can be used at any time. If something really happens that we can't handle, we'll retreat as soon as possible, said Lei Jun of the Heavenly Thunder Clan. Everyone immediately agreed with his suggestion. Afterwards, they immediately sent people to conduct a full inspection of the teleportation formation before charging it with energy so that it could be used at any time. However, none of them knew that just as they were replenishing the energy of the teleportation formation, in the sky above the 100 Holy City, outside the light screen formed by the protective formation of the 100 Holy City, there was an illusory figure floating in the sky. He seemed to have merged with the entire world. Not only did he not have any aura, but even the naked I could not detect his existence. Even if someone inadvertently scanned the place where the figure was with the naked eye, they would find that there was nothing in the void. At this moment, this figure was gazing at the 100 Holy City below in a condescending manner, uttering a murmur that only he could hear back then when I saved you in the Two-World Mountain. I was hoping that you could play some role at the critical moment of the grand ritual. If I let you all leave safely, wouldn't I have wasted my efforts back then? As he said that, the illusory figure flicked his finger at the 100 Saints City below. An extremely weak, obscure strand of energy shot out in a single instance, directly entering the city. The powerful formation that the 100 Saints City took pride in was useless before the weak, obscure strand of energy. It was unable to obstruct it at all. allowing the strand of energy to pass through the formation and enter the city without anyone noticing. In the end, it vanished into the only teleportation formation in the city. The teleportation formation did not change at all. It was the same as before, except there was an additional strand of energy that no one could detect. We can only succeed in this operation. Even with Jianqin, the chess piece of the upper echelon of the Dark Star race, I need to make many preparations. The trump card of the 100 Saint City has never been used by the Dark Star race, so it's time for me to use it. With the gathering of the energy of everyone in the city, the amplification from the countless formations in the city, and the tremendous source of energy buried deep beneath the city, the supreme attack is enough to rival chaotic primes. Although the power of the attack will decrease slightly when it reaches the grand ceremony, it will still affect the grand ceremony to some extent. With the Dark Star Emperor present, the attack might not be able to destroy the grand ceremony completely, but it can cover up for Jianqin at a crucial moment. Jianqin, you better not let me down. If you fail as well, I can only use my final move. It's just that I really don't want to use this final move. Otherwise, not only will my second soul be obliterated by the power of the blood oath, but even my original body in the saint's world will still be heavily injured by the power of the blood oath, Jianqin said with a sigh. Chapter 2906. In the low murmur, the illusory figure floating outside the 100 Saints City's guardian formation gradually disappeared. He had left the place at an incomprehensible speed. A moment ago, he was in the 100 Saints City. In the next moment, he had already appeared in the imperial city of the Dark Star race, which was very far away from the 100 Saints City. He did not use the laws of space, but he surpassed the laws of space. He moved so quickly that he could cross billions of kilometers in a single instance. Even Jianqin, who had reached the primordial realm in terms of his comprehension of the laws of space, could not catch up to him. At the same time, the Dark Star Emperor's eyes were closed as he hovered above his throne in the Dark Star Divine Palace in the royal capital of the Dark Star race. He was using the senses of his soul to observe the current situation of the Dark Star race. At this moment, the illusionary figure appeared in the divine hall silently. His feet did not touch the ground, and he hovered in the divine hall at a height a head lower than the Dark Star Emperor. The Dark Star Emperor seemed to sense something. He opened his eyes and looked at the elusive figure. A rare sliver of respect appeared on his face, and he said, "Tian Shengxian, the day of the grand ceremony is getting closer and closer. May I ask how confident you are in succeeding this time?" After a moment of thought, Tian Shengxian said slowly, "Originally, the success rate of the grand ceremony was only 50% at most, with half success and half failure. The final result would all depend on luck. However, with the blood of the divine beast now, the success rate has increased by quite a lot. I estimate that the success rate this time will be 80 or 90% at most." 80 or 90%. In other words, the success of the grand ceremony this time is basically guaranteed. The Dark Star Emperor exhaled deeply. He was unable to contain his excitement. An 80 or 90% chance of success meant that the chances of failure were extremely small. In theory, that's the case, but please don't forget that nothing is absolute, Emperor. Even if we think there's a 10% chance of success, the grand ceremony might fail if any unexpected changes occur, said Tian Shengxian. Unexpected? In the Emperor's opinion, if there really were unexpected changes, it would come from the foreign cultivators. However, how could the Emperor not be prepared against them? The grand ceremony this time is something that will affect the fate of our race. The Emperor will not allow any accidents to happen, the Dark Star Emperor said firmly. His calm gaze became extremely cold. If the grand ceremony succeeded, he would be able to become a chaotic prime. If it failed, he would remain at his current level of cultivation, unable to break through for an extremely long period of time. As a result, the grand ceremony was related to the fate of the entire Dark Star race as well as his own interests. Tian Shengxian could not help but reveal a strange smile when he heard the Dark Star Emperor's words. However, his entire body was blurry and hazy, as if he was hidden in a layer of mist. No one, including the Darkstar Emperor, could see his true appearance. After a while, the Darkstar Emperor said in an almost pleading tone, "Tian Shangxian, do you think that once the Emperor becomes a ninth heavenly layer chaotic prime, he'll really be able to use the secret technique passed down in our race to use the power left behind by the ancestor and the astral beast to break through the restraints of the grand exalt of the wood spirit race and free our race from this prison? There's a sliver of hope, but I don't know if he'll succeed in the end. After all, there are far, far too many things that even I don't know about when it comes to grand exalts," Tian Shangxian said in a deep voice. Tian Shangxian said after some thought. However, there was a flash of coldness in his eyes, which seemed to be covered by layers, and no one could see it. A sliver of hope is good too. It's better than no hope at all. Breaking free from the restraints of this world and taking a look at the true world outside has been the long-cherished wish of our race for all these years. The Darkstar Emperor sighed deeply. His face was filled with sorrow and desolation. To put it nicely, the Darkstar world was a miniature world that was completely ruled by the Darkstar race. To put it bluntly, it was a prison. The prison had imprisoned them for countless years, forcing them to live in this tiny world that was not a true world. It was formed from the death of an astral beast, so it was not a true world. Breaking free from this prison and going to the true world outside had been the wish of the Darkstar race for generations. Once the ritual succeeds, the Emperor will immediately become a chaotic prime with the help of the Fruit of Ways. Ninth heavenly layer chaotic primes won't be able to stump the Emperor. The Emperor will reach a level where he can barely comprehend the ancestors' secret technique in the shortest amount of time possible. Then he will be able to use the power left behind by the ancestor and break free from the restraints of the grand exalt of the Wood Spirit clan. It's just that in the past few years, our race has become enemies with many organizations in the outside world. Once we break free, the organizations with grand primes behind them will definitely not let us go. And the few items left behind by our ancestors will probably be targeted by the organizations in the outside world as well. Tian Shangxian, you are a great sage of our race. You already existed before the Emperor was born. I wonder if the organization you've established in the Saints' world after so many years of development will be able to deal with the crisis we face after breaking free, said the Darkstar Emperor. Don't worry, Emperor. My organization has already reached a level where we don't need to fear the 100 Saints cities anymore. As long as we break free, the organizations in the outside world won't be able to pose a threat to us, said Tian Shangxian. Then the Emperor doesn't have to worry. Oh right, is the Earth Sage doing well? Asked the Darkstar Emperor. Thank you for your concern, Emperor. He's doing well, said Tian Shangxian, even though his tone was neither servile nor overbearing, making him seem like an equal to the Darkstar Emperor. He seemed more like a subject when he conversed with the Darkstar Emperor. After a moment of silence, the Darkstar Emperor asked again, Tian Shangxian, actually the Emperor has always been very curious. What's the name of the organization you and the Earth Sage have established in the Saints' world? How many experts are there? And what level of cultivation do you and the Earth Sage currently possess, such that you don't even fear the organizations behind the 100 Saint cities anymore? This question has already lingered in the Emperor's mind for many years. Is Tian Shangxian really unwilling to reveal anything? The Emperor should know that everything about me in the Saints' world is top secret to everyone in my clan. Even you are no exception. I have the right to keep this secret, Jianqin said with a smile. Chapter 2907. The Wood Spirits. The Darkstar Emperor muttered those 3 words in a deep voice. The name, Wood Spirit Clan, seemed to possess some sort of magic, causing his mind to ripple, making it difficult for him to maintain his composure. Even his expression had changed. It was an expression that was hard to describe, but more than that, it was a hatred that was engraved in his bones and engraved in his heart. This was because the Wood Spirits were the mortal enemies of their Darkstar race. In the battle, countless years ago, the Dark Star race had lost. Not only had the Grand Exalt of the Dark Star race died to the hands of the Wood Spirits, but even the entire Dark Star race had been trapped in this miniature world, unable to leave for the rest of their lives. However, even though the Dark Star race had fallen to such a state, the power left behind by the Grand Exalt of the Wood Spirits had created a place like the Two-World Mountain to keep the Dark Star race in check. It was no exaggeration to say that even though an extremely long time had passed since the battle back then, the enmity between the Wood Spirit clan and the Dark Star clan did not decrease at all. Instead, as time went on, the enmity gradually seeped into the bones of every Dark Star clansman. Their breakthroughs were thousands of times more difficult than outside cultivators. Cultivators in the outside world could directly reach Grand Prime, while they could only reach Infinite Prime. Cultivators in the outside world could move through the boundless outer space, freely going to any place they wanted to go, while the Dark Star race could only hide in this tiny world. All of this was inextricably linked to the Wood Spirit clan. This was a grievance between races that no one could resolve. Tian Shengxian, how's the strength of the Wood Spirits in the outside world? The Dark Star Emperor asked. In the past, they did not care about the situation of the Wood Spirits in the outside world because they were unable to leave, while the Wood Spirits clearly did not dare to come in. As a result, even with their grievances, the two races were fated to never meet again. However, the situation was different now. Their Dark Star race now had a sliver of hope of breaking out of this prison, so they had to reconsider the existence of the Wood Spirits. The current Wood Spirits are nothing to worry about. It's just that their race possesses a supreme figure who can be regarded as invincible apart from Grand Exalts in the Saints' world. Furthermore, that person has already become our enemy, and that's because they don't know about my background. If the Wood Spirit clan learns that we've secretly established an organization in the Saints' world and they fan the flames, our power in the Saints' world will be in even greater danger, said Tian Shengxian. His voice clearly became much heavier when he mentioned that supreme figure. Along with it, there was also a deep sense of fear. The Dark Star Emperor frowned. I never thought that we would have such a great enemy in the outside world. Looks like we need to carefully hide for a while, even if we break free in the future. Emperor, there's still quite some time before we break out of this prison. We can talk about the matters of the Saints' world in the future. Let's gather the Hall Lords and Vice Hall Lords right now and explain the process and details of the grand ceremony in detail. Tian Shengxian changed the topic as if he did not want to talk about the Saints' world too much. The Dark Star Emperor nodded and said in thought, that works too. The grand ceremony this time will be different from the past. We need you to personally host it, Tian Shengxian. As a result, we won't be able to hide your identity anymore. However, it's time to tell the upper echelon of our race about the existence of the two great sages. Afterwards, the Dark Star Emperor immediately ordered the Hall Lords and Vice Hall Lords of the 10 Divine Halls to be gathered. This time, aside from the people of the 10 Divine Halls, even the 5 city lords who ranked in the top 5 of the 36 cities of the Dark Star race had come. The 5 city lords were also primordial realm experts, but they were all first heavenly layer infinite primes. Tian Shengxian. Jianqin discovered Tian Shengxian as soon as he arrived in the Dark Star Divine Hall. Tian Shengxian's current position was just too eye-catching. He stood right beside the Dark Star Emperor, so it was impossible for him to not notice him. Jianqin immediately became vigilant with Tian Shengxian's existence. He became careful, concealing himself as much as he could so as not to reveal any flaws. This was because Tian Shengxian was the only person he could not see through in the Dark Star race. Even though the illusionary figure was not particularly powerful, Jianqin felt that Tian Shengxian was rather unfathomable. The remaining 9 Hall Lords and Vice Hall Lords clearly discovered the illusionary figure beside the Dark Star Emperor as well. They were all stunned as doubt filled their faces. Clearly, none of the primordial realm experts present knew about Tian Xingxian's existence apart from Jianqin. The Dark Star Emperor glanced past everyone slowly and said first, "Since you're all here, it's time for me to announce a secret that only emperors have the right to know." The eyes of all the primordial realm experts present narrowed when they heard the Dark Star Emperor's words. Many of them subconsciously glanced at Tian Shangxian and sank into their thoughts. They could guess that the secret the Emperor was talking about was probably related to the illusionary figure. No one said anything. Everyone was waiting for the Dark Star Emperor to speak. As members of the upper echelon of the Dark Star race, they all knew that there were many secrets within the Dark Star race that even Hall Masters did not have the right to know. Over the years, only the Dark Star Emperor could come into contact with these secrets. Dark Star Emperor was silent for a short while before he slowly said, "Countless years ago, the wise seniors of our clan had thought of countless methods and tried countless times in order to help our clan break free in the future. They paid an unimaginable price before they finally created the clan ritual that could draw upon the residual power of our ancestors. Soon after the grand ritual appeared, the seniors of our race discovered that once we activated the grand ritual and drew on the power of our ancestors, we would be able to fend off the grand exalt of the wood spirit for a short period of time. At the same time, the seal that the grand exalt of the wood spirit placed on our race would weaken for a moment. As a result, the seniors of our race chose 2 seniors with the greatest talent and bestowed the great fortune of our race on them. Afterwards, they activated the grand ritual and drew on the power of our ancestors. While the power of our ancestors was fending off the grand exalt of the wood spirit, they finally managed to send the 2 seniors who possessed the fortune of our race out. They hoped that they could find a way to break free in the Saints' world. Ever since then, the 2 seniors have become the sages of our race because not only do they possess the fortune of our race, but they also bear the hope of breaking free. They also bear the responsibility of protecting our race in the future. These 2 sages are known as Tian Shangxian and Di Shangxian because they are the future hope of our race. They are the hope of bringing a new world to our race. Chapter 2908. What? He's one of the 2 great sages, Tian Shang? I never thought that there would be 2 great sages, Tian Shang and Di Shang, in the history of our race. It really is the predecessors who are wise. They're actually searching for hope for their descendants to break free from that untraceable history. The revelation of Tian Xingxian's identity immediately caused quite a stir in the Dark Star Divine Hall. While the primordial realm experts gathered there were surprised by the existence of the 2 sages. Some of them looked at Tian Shangxian with some doubt. Clearly, they believed in the existence of the 2 great sages, but they did not trust Tian Xing very much. Or in other words, they did not really accept him. Jianqin finally learned about Tian Shang's true origins at that moment as well. He was more shocked than everyone present. "Senior Tian Shang, there's something that I don't understand. Since you were sent to the Saints' world countless years ago, you should have cultivated there for an endless amount of time. With the plentiful resources of the Saints' world and the great fortune of our race, Tian Shang should have reached an unimaginable level of cultivation. However, why is Tian Shang's presence not as powerful as I imagined it to be?" Jia Di was the first to voice his doubts. "That's a good question. However, I should answer this question in 2 parts. The first part is about time." Tian Shang smiled at the clear doubts and distrust from the Hall Lords. He explained calmly, "Although some time has already passed since I was sent out of the Dark Star world, where even I can't describe the exact amount of time, I haven't actually lived for that long. Because in the distant past, even though my clansmen paid an extremely heavy price to send me out, the path I took to leave wasn't smooth at all. Every step was filled with danger, and the slightest carelessness would cause my soul to be destroyed. After all, if I wanted to leave, I needed to break through the seal of the Grand Exalt of the Wood Spirit Clan. Even though the power of the Grand Exalt of the Wood Spirit Clan had been weakened by the remnant power of my ancestor, it had not vanished completely. As a result, when the two of us left this world, we were attacked by the remnant power of the Grand Exalt of the Wood Spirit clan. Even with the protection of our ancestor and the great fortune of our race, we were unable to break free from the Grand Exalt of the Wood Spirit clan. As a result, when we arrived in the spirit's world, we were already dead. Fortunately, when our souls were about to be wiped out, perhaps because of the protection of our ancestor, a sliver of our souls managed to escape. Afterwards, we immediately reincarnated to avoid being killed by the power of the Grand Exalt of the Wood Spirit clan. However, how could the power of a Grand Exalt be so easily erased? Even though the Grand Exalt of the Wood Spirit clan had already died back then, his will of ways remained. Some of the laws of the world he had set down before his death still remained. As a result, after we reincarnated, the remnant power of the Grand Exalt of the Wood Spirit clan constantly tangled with us. As a result, every time we reincarnated as humans, we did not live for long, dying prematurely. Fortunately, we had the protection of our ancestors' power, and we possessed the fortune of the entire Dark Star race, allowing us to reincarnate time and time again as we fought against the remnant power of the Grand Exalt of the Wood Spirit clan. In the end, even we lost track of how many times we reincarnated, but every time we reincarnated, we would see a new world. Every time we reincarnated, the saints' world would experience a new landscape. We had no idea how many years had passed. Finally, after countless reincarnations, we completely broke free from the torture of the remnant power of the Grand Exalt of the Wood Spirit clan in this life. We could truly begin to cultivate. Tian Shengxian paused slightly when he reached there. He said with a voice filled with mixed feelings, "As a result, although the two of us left the Dark Star world a very, very long time ago, we were always fighting against the remnant power of the Grand Exalt of the Wood Spirit clan. We reincarnated time and time again, so the time we spent cultivating was nowhere near as long as you imagine." When Tian Xingxian's words entered everyone's ears, they immediately fell silent. Reincarnating time and time again, engaging in the most intense battles against the remnant power of the Grand Exalt time and time again, as well as dying time and time again. What kind of torture was that? At the very least, the suffering, the torment, and the great sacrifices they had to make was something that the authoritative primordial realm experts who cultivated peacefully in the Dark Star race, had never experienced. At this moment, everyone's doubts and distrust were greatly diluted, and they were replaced by sympathy and deep admiration. This was because they discovered that compared to everything Tian Shengxian had gone through in the past, they seemed to be living in heaven. Even though they were trapped here, they did not have to worry about dying. Tian Shengxian continued, "The second part is about my current state. To be honest, the Grand Exalt of the Wood Spirit clan has not only forbidden us from leaving, but also from entering this place from the outside world. As a result, I possess the bloodline of the Wood Spirit clan. My true body is unable to enter this place from the outside world, or my soul will be destroyed. This figure right now is a clone of my soul that I've only cultivated after paying a certain price. Calling it a clone of my soul is not completely accurate. This is because it possesses my soul, but it does not possess the bloodline or presence of the Dark Star race. This is not something that can be explained in a few words. Anyway, you can treat it as a second soul, a second clone, or a second life. The main purpose of my second soul existing here is to host the grand ceremony and ensure that it completes successfully. It does not possess much battle prowess. Senior Tian Shengxian, may I ask if Di Shengxian is here? The two of you have made unimaginable sacrifices for our race. I admire your selfless dedication. Now, I just want to pay a proper visit to the two of you," the 10th Hall Master, Feng Shui, said from the bottom of her heart. "Di Shengxian is unable to enter as he is in the Saints' world. I'm the only one who can come from the Dark Star race right now." Tian Shengxian said after some thought, "We can talk about other unimportant matters in the future. I've summoned you here today mainly to explain some matters related to the grand ceremony." Afterwards, Tian Shengxian began to get down to business. He explained the process of the grand ceremony to the primordial realm experts and the various details they needed to pay attention to. Everyone in the hall paid close attention, afraid that they would miss out on a single word. However, Jianqin was rather absent-minded. Chapter 2909. No wonder I always felt like Tian Shengxian was unfathomable, unable to see through him no matter what. As it turns out, he's a supreme expert himself. Jianqin's heart thumped wildly. He thought about everything he had experienced when he first met Tian Shengxian. He could not help but doubt his identity once again. Had Tian Shengxian seen through him? This was because his mask was not truly unbreakable. Once someone reached the apex of cultivation, they would be able to see through the mask and see through his true appearance. What if Tian Shengxian was an expert like that? After all, not only was Tian Shengxian the most outstanding clansman of the Darkstar clan, but he also possessed the fortune of the entire Darkstar clan. He had received the protection of the remnant power of the Grand Exalt of the Darkstar clan, going through reincarnation after reincarnation. When these unimaginable things happened to any ordinary person, they would undergo a metamorphosis like a fish leaping through the dragon gate, not to mention that Tian Shengxian himself was not an ordinary person. As a result, it was no surprise that Tian Shengxian could become an expert of this level after countless years of cultivation and the fortune of the Darkstar clan. At that moment, Jianqin became rather unsettled. Aside from Tian Shengxian, the Darkstar clan also has an earthly sage in the Saints' world. The earthly sage's cultivation must be extremely terrifying as well. I've come to the Darkstar clan this time because the heartless child of the Myriad Bone Guild asked me to disrupt the great ritual of the Darkstar clan. The heartless child went as far as to personally escort me to the ruins of the spirit's world, just so I could enter the Darkstar world to disrupt the ritual. I can tell that disrupting the ritual is extremely important to the heartless child. But why does the heartless child not wish for the ritual to succeed? What is he afraid of? With his peak cultivation, even if the Darkstar clan really does break free, wiping out the entire Darkstar clan is just a matter of raising a hand. At that moment, Jianqin thought of a few questions that he had never considered before. The more he thought about it, the more doubts and questions he had accumulated in his head. Or in other words, the heartless child is the earthly sage of the Darkstar clan? Suddenly, a ridiculous idea popped up in Jianqin's mind. However, when this idea popped up, some inexplicable doubts were instantly resolved. Darkstar Sky Sage and Earth Sage were originally together. If the heartless child is Earth Sage, then he and Sky Sage are the same kind of people. If that's the case, the Heavenly Sage must have known that the heartless child wanted me to destroy the grand ritual of the Darkstar race, and the Heavenly Sage knew that I was going to do something detrimental to the Darkstar race. Yet he did not stop me. Instead, he pretended not to know. Without a doubt, this means that the destruction of the grand ritual of the Darkstar race was not just the heartless child's intention alone. It was also the Heavenly Sage's intention. If it's really as I've guessed, then it'll explain why Tian Shengxian didn't reveal my identity after learning of it. It's because Tian Shengxian also doesn't want the Darkstar tribe's ritual to succeed. Jianqin's head spun rapidly as more and more terrifying thoughts appeared in his head. Even he found these thoughts to be ridiculous and impossible. But as soon as he connected the dots, he discovered that many things made sense. He felt like the fog had cleared up and the sky had cleared up. Why does the heartless child want to destroy the grand ritual of the Darkstar race? And why doesn't Tian Shengxian want the grand ritual to succeed? Aren't they part of the Darkstar race in the first place? And with the terrifying cultivation of the two sages, let alone chaotic primes, even grand primes from the Darkstar race are probably as insignificant as ants before the heartless child and Tian Shengxian. He's the host of the grand ritual this time. If he doesn't want the grand ritual to succeed, there are far too many opportunities for him to do so. Why does he need an outsider like me to do this? Jianqin thought of many more questions. After learning about the saint of heaven and earth's identity and intentions, it also filled him with even more doubts and questions. Suddenly, he thought of the day when he saw Tian Shangxian. Tian Shangxian had clearly behaved like a subject before the Dark Star Emperor. A thought immediately flashed through his head, and he came to a realization. Don't tell me that the saint of heaven and earth was bound by some sort of oath when he was sent out by the Dark Star race? It prevented the two of them from doing anything that would harm the Dark Star race. As a result, they could only go to great lengths to get someone else to do certain things for them. And their final goal isn't actually to destroy the entire Dark Star race. It's just like what the Heartless Child said, which is to destroy the grand ritual and prevent the Dark Star race from producing a chaotic prime. This is because the more powerful the Dark Star race is, the greater their chances of breaking free will be. Once the Dark Star race really breaks free, the saint of heaven and earth who can do whatever he wants in the saint's world will be reduced to a subject. If that's the case, then all of the questions and mysteries can be explained. As his analysis became more and more thorough, Jianqin calmed down instead. However, this calmness did not last for very long. When he thought of something else, an undetectable cold light immediately flashed through his eyes. I've already said everything that needs to be said. Everyone, please bear it in mind. You can't make any mistakes during the grand ritual this time. Tian Shangxian spoke for half a day before finally explaining all the details and procedures of the grand ritual, as well as some matters that required special attention. Don't worry, Tian Shangxian. The grand ritual this time concerns the fate of our entire race. If any of us make any mistakes, we'll naturally be the sinner of our entire race. The second hall master, Anna, clasped his fist at Tian Shangxian as he showed undisguised respect. Don't worry, Tian Shangxian. We will do our best. After Anna, the other hall masters and vice hall masters all spoke out. They all spoke like they were making an oath. After dispersing the meeting, Jianchen returned to the fifth divine hall. He lay on the throne as he sank into his thoughts. He already knew the exact procedures of the grand ritual, so he pondered over when he should take action. Fusing the blood of all races into one and using an ancient secret technique to refine it, the grand ritual this time is an opportunity for Siyu as well. However, if I'm not careful, I'll be done for. Jianqin gently sighed inside. With a flash, he vanished from the throne and arrived in the secret room for seclusion. After closing the door, Jianqin activated all the isolation formations in the secret room before casting down some formations himself. He acted mysteriously, carefully, and cautiously. Only after everything was set up did he sit down on the ground. He took out Kuan Tian's sword and aimed the tip of the sword at his abdomen before viciously stabbing it. Under his full strength, the powerful body of the chaotic body was pierced through with great difficulty. A smear of blood immediately appeared on his abdomen. The sharp tip of the sword had already stabbed into his body, leaving behind a 2-inch-long wound. Afterwards, Jianchen extended his finger into the wound and pulled out a jade bottle sealed within his flesh. The jade bottle was not large, only the size of a thumb. However, there was something else inside, hiding quite a large space. Chapter 2910. Afterwards, Jianchen cut his finger and sealed the blood that belonged to Kuan Tian into his finger. As he sealed the blood, he could not help but think of the mysterious Tian Sheng. If Tian Sheng really is a supreme expert who can see through my mask, then I definitely won't be able to hide my actions in the fifth hall from him. If his goal is the same as the Heartless Child's, then even if he knows my identity, he'll take the initiative to cover it up for me. As a result, I probably don't need to conceal myself before Tian Sheng, Jianchen pondered. He still did not feel safe. What if he was wrong? Looks like I have to find some time to test Tian Sheng. At the very least, I need to confirm which side he's on. That way, I'll be able to know what to do during the ritual. The next day, Jianchen went to the Dark Star Divine Hall alone to seek an audience with the Dark Star Emperor. Within the same majestic hall, the Dark Star Emperor sat on the throne with a serene expression. Jianqin, on the other hand, bowed slightly as he stood below in a saluting posture. Kun Tian, why have you come to find the Emperor? The Dark Star Emperor asked with an extremely calm tone. Emperor, there are still some things that I do not understand regarding the ritual, so I wish to see Senior Tiansheng. I hope Senior Tiansheng can clear up my doubts, Jianqin said from below. The Dark Star Emperor pondered for a moment before asking, Is Tiansheng here? The first call did not receive a response from Tiansheng. Afterwards, the Dark Star Emperor called a second time and a third time. After calling out to him 3 times, Tiansheng still did not appear. Immediately, a wisp of helplessness appeared on the Dark Star Emperor's face. He said, Tiansheng has always been elusive. Even I can't find him. Come back another day. Yes, Emperor. Jianqin revealed a sliver of regret. After bidding farewell, he left the Dark Star Divine Hall and returned to the 5th hall. Kun Tian, do you need something from me? However, not long after Jianqin returned to the 5th hall, a familiar voice rang out in the empty hall. He abruptly raised his head and saw Tianxingxin's illusory figure floating in the air. There was not a trace of aura around him, and his divine sense was blank. If one did not use their eyes, they would not be able to sense his existence at all. A gleam of light flashed through Jianqin's eyes. He immediately stood up and bowed to Tiansheng. Junior Tiansheng greets Senior Tiansheng. After pausing for a moment, Jianqin continued, I do have some matters that I would like to ask Senior Sage about. I still have some doubts about the matters of the grand ceremony. I don't understand them completely. Afterwards, Tianshengs to Tianshengs asked Tiansheng to Tiansheng to Tiansheng to answer to Tiansheng's doubts, Tiansheng to Sheng. However, Tiansheng did not seem to doubt him. He earnestly answered all of Jianqin's questions, as if he was truly working hard for the success of the ritual. Tiansheng's serious attitude made Jianqin doubt himself. He wondered if his guess about Tiansheng's identity was wrong. Was Tiansheng not on the same side as the heartless child? Thank you for your patience, Senior Tiansheng. It's just that the ritual this time is just too important to my race. Not only have I lost my memories, but I'm also affected by the remnant consciousness of the astral beast. Once I lose control, even I don't know what I'll do. So I'm under a lot of pressure. I'm afraid I'll affect the ritual. Jianqin revealed a deep sense of worry. He suddenly asked Tiansheng, Do you think the ritual this time will fail? What will happen if it fails? Fail? Tianshengxian muttered those 2 words under his breath. He sank into his thoughts, and only after quite a while did he say gloomily, If we fail, all the preparations and sacrifices we've made for the grand ritual over the past few years will be for naught. Our great goal of becoming a chaotic prime will fail as well. Even the divine beast sigh. What will happen to the divine beast? Jianqin's heart skipped a beat as he asked calmly. After a moment of silence, Tianshengxian said, If the grand ritual succeeds, the divine beast will become the primer for drawing out the remaining power of the grand exalt of my race. Its flesh and essence will disperse into the world. Or it can be said that it will fuse with the world of my race and become a sacrifice for the grand ritual. However, if the ritual fails, not only will the divine beast have a chance at survival, but it will also fuse with the blood of all races. Perhaps it will obtain a fortuitous encounter as a result, and its strength will increase drastically. Our race has done so many extremely cruel things to the divine beast, so the divine beast definitely holds deep-rooted hatred towards our race. As a result, once the ritual fails and the divine beast's strength increases, it will become a huge problem for our race. Jianqin frowned as a cold light flashed through his eyes. He said coldly, In other words, even if the ritual fails, we have to kill the divine beast before it matures, just in case it becomes a huge problem for our race in the future. As long as you understand. However, there's no need for you to worry about this. The Emperor has already understood the stakes involved. When the time comes, he will personally take action to eliminate the problem. Tian Xingxian's figure slowly vanished. At the same time, a voice that seemed to carry some deeper meaning drifted into Jian Chen's ears. Kuan Tian, since you're the leader of the Fifth Hall, you obviously have your own mission. The success or failure of the ritual is not something you should be concerned about. Just focus on carrying out your mission. With that, Tian Sheng vanished as well. Jianqin returned to his seat and sank into a long period of silence. If the ritual succeeds, Siyu will definitely die. If the ritual fails, not only will Siyu survive, but he will also obtain a fortuitous encounter. Tian Sheng has told me about Siyu's life and death so straightforwardly. It's more like a hint to me, or a warning. He's warning me that if I want Siyu to survive, I need to destroy the ritual. Otherwise, Siyu will die, and that last sentence, the success or failure of the ritual, is not something I should be concerned about. Just focus on carrying out my mission. The success or failure of the ritual is something all the Darkstar clansmen should be concerned about. After all, it's something that can change their fates, yet Tian Sheng says that it's not something I should be concerned about? As for my mission, the first reason I entered the Darkstar clan is to save Siyu, and the second reason is to complete the mission the Heartless Child gave me, to destroy the ritual. No matter how I look at it, Tian Sheng's words don't seem to be directed at the former Kun Tian. Instead, they seem to be directed at my true identity, Jianqin. Chapter 29:11. Afterwards, the Darkstar race became much more peaceful. The reason why it was peaceful was because the cultivators who could be seen everywhere outside the city had become much rarer now. As for the cultivators from the outside world who went to Two World Mountain, they had all vanished. There were only small groups of Divine King Realm experts of the Darkstar race. They patrolled the territory of the Darkstar world and captured cultivators from the outside world. The entire 100 Saints city remained vigilant. The protective formations were always maintained at their most powerful state. The 52 organizations that remained in the city silently hoped that the Darkstar race's grand ceremony would end soon. They also carefully guarded the only teleportation formation in the city. This was because this was their only hope of escaping. It was their final reliance. At the same time, they inspected the teleportation formation extremely harshly. They would basically inspect it carefully every single day. They would even send people to conduct experiments to ensure that it could operate normally at crucial moments. Although some of the Heaven's prides among them were cowardly and had already decided to give up, the journey to the Darkstar realm this time around was more of a test given to them by their clans. It concerned their future. Thus, none of them wished to become deserters before they could ascertain whether or not there would be any danger. Even though a third of the organizations in the city had already left, that was because they had been threatened by the Seventh Hall. If they did not leave, only death would await them. Retreating under these circumstances was not shameful, and the clans would not blame them either. However, if they retreated just because the atmosphere in the Darkstar race was tense, and they did so under the promise of the Fifth Hall's Hall Master's protection, it would be completely different. As a result, the 52 organizations in the city continued to hold on. Time passed silently. As the Darkstar clansmen waited eagerly and the cultivators in the outside world waited nervously and uneasily, the day of the grand ceremony that the Darkstar race had been preparing for all this time finally arrived. The location of the grand ceremony was the royal capital of the Darkstar race. Currently, all the peak experts of the Darkstar race had gathered in the royal capital. Aside from all the primordial realm experts of the Darkstar race, the city lords of the 36 main cities, as well as the 108 kings and 36 lords of each city, had all gathered in the royal capital. There was not a single cultivator from the outside world in the royal capital. All the people from the ruins of the Saints' world and the Spirit Sage's world had been gathered in the 36 main cities. The grand ceremony this time was something that could change the fate of the entire race. As a result, the Darkstar race placed the greatest importance on security during the ceremony. Not only did they send out the 10 famed armies of the Dark Star race to guard the royal capital, but they also mobilized all the forces in the 36 main cities under the command of their vice city, lords to guard. The people they were guarding against were all the cultivators from the outside world who had been confined in the 36 main cities. Above the royal capital, the 10 divine halls that originally hovered in the air had all changed positions. They seemed to form some kind of formation. The Dark Star Divine Hall that originally hovered above the 10 divine halls had also descended. It was surrounded by the 10 divine halls in a special formation, like the stars surrounding the moon. The 11 divine halls hovered in the air. Every single one of them shone with dazzling light, radiating with powerful pulses of energy. They seemed like 11 bright suns at first glance. Below the divine halls were the organizations from the 36 main cities. They were led by the city lords of each region, supported by the 36 lords and the 108 kings. They all sat in the air, forming a great formation. Among them, Dark Knight City had chosen a new city lord during this period of time. They had also appointed 36 lords and 108 kings. Below the organizations of the 36 cities were countless people in the royal capital. At this moment, countless people knelt on the ground devoutly, waiting for the exciting moment. Open the altar! At this moment, above the royal capital, the Dark Star Great sat at the top of the Dark Star Divine Hall. He had a solemn expression as he spoke in a dignified voice. His voice spread throughout the entire city, reaching the ears of every single person. Open the altar, draw the power of Windless City, open the altar, draw the power of Dark Knight City, open the altar, draw the power of Joy City, open the altar, draw the power of Dark Knight City, open the altar, draw the power of Blacklight City. Almost as soon as the Dark Star Great finished speaking, the voices of the 36 city lords resounded through the sky. With their voices, the formation formed by the 36 lords and the 108 kings was activated. In an instant, a mysterious connection seemed to have been established between them and the 36 main cities in the distance. Suddenly, in the distant heavens and earth, 36 brilliant pillars of light rose into the sky, heading straight for the royal capital from 36 different directions. This was the power of the 36 main cities. The 36 forces crossed a long distance and directly enveloped the respective city lords, the 36 lords and the 108 kings. Then, under the control of the 36 city lords, the power of the 36 cities merged into one in an instant. Like a sharp sword, it bloomed with a bright light that illuminated the whole world and directly pierced into the void 10,000 meters above the royal capital. From a distance, it looked like a huge white pillar of light rose from the ground and pierced into the sky. It was like a pillar that held up the sky, bright and spectacular. The next moment, in the void space 10,000 meters high in the sky, the space fluctuated violently. The white energy pillar formed by the power of the 36 cities was like a key, opening a mysterious door hidden in the void. Inside the mysterious door, an altar that seemed to be completely forged from white jade slowly drifted out. The altar was not very large, only several thousand meters across. There were many stone tablets on it, and ancient diagrams and words were carved on them. They seemed to record the glorious and resplendent history of the Dark Star race, giving off a heavy presence of time. At the very center of the altar stood a human-shaped statue. It was abnormally large, surrounded by thousands of stone tablets. It was worshipped by countless creatures, like a sovereign of the world. However, the human-shaped statue did not have a face, so it was impossible to make out its facial features. It was only possible to tell that it was a man from some of its physical characteristics. He was an exceptionally tall and imposing man who exuded a domineering aura, as if he was the sole ruler of the world. Is this person the grand exalt of the Dark Star race? Genshin's heart trembled as he sat at the very top of the 5th divine hall. This was because he could sense a profound presence from the featureless statue. In his eyes, the The statue seemed to condense the ways of the Dark Star race. It was the highest point of all the ways of the Dark Star race. The altar slowly drifted out of the void space. In the end, it hovered 10,000 meters above the royal capital. Once the space above settled down, Tian Xingxian's illusionary figure suddenly appeared. He did not directly fly up the altar. Instead, like a staircase to the heavens, he climbed up the altar one step at a time. Chapter 2912. With that, everyone in the Dark Star clan, from the Dark Star Emperor and the 10 Hall Masters to the ordinary members of the Dark Star clan, knelt down. They were kowtowing to the ancestor of the Dark Star clan. They were kowtowing to the most powerful person in the history of the Dark Star clan. They were kowtowing to the supreme sovereign of the past. Before the statue, even someone like Tian Xingxian had to put away all of his pride. He also knelt down on both knees with a face filled with sincerity. All of this was because the statue had been a supreme existence in the past. He had basically become the way of the world and could set the laws of the world. He was a grand exalt expert who could interfere with the operation of the ways of the world to a certain extent. A person like that was the greatest power of a complete world, the sturdiest foundation. He was worshipped by all people and could not be violated or desecrated. Jianqin knelt down as well. Even though he was rather unwilling, he had to kneel. Otherwise, it would be too abrupt. However, when he thought about how the statue had been a grand exalt in the past, he did not find it so unacceptable. First kneel, second kneel, third kneel. 9 kowtows. After a total of 9 kowtows, the illusory heaven sage stood up. Then, under his direction, he carried out many sacred and solemn rituals. Only after 4 hours had passed did these complicated rituals finally complete. With the power of the 36 cities as support and the power of the 10 halls as the main force, activate the altar. Tian Xingxian's voice rang out once more. Immediately, the power of the 36 main cities was activated again. Every single city had become a tremendous source of energy. Not only did the entire city glow, but there was also an extremely boundless energy hidden in the depths of every single city. The energy had been accumulated over countless years by the 36 cities absorbing the energy of the world through formations. In the end, the energy stored in every single city had reached an extremely shocking level. At that moment, the tremendous source of energy that had been stored for many years had been summoned through the formation formed by the 36 city lords and the 108 kings. It pierced through the distant space and reached the royal capital of the Dark Star clan. This time it was a ceremony to activate the altar. The power of the 36 cities was clearly far from enough to activate the altar. As a result, the participation of the 10 halls was also required. The 10 divine palaces had already formed a strange array in midair. The power of the divine palaces intertwined and seemed to deduce some mysterious rules. Together with the power of the 36 cities, they entered the altar in the sky, causing the altar to burst into an incomparably dazzling light in an instant. It was as if the altar had been awakened from its slumber, causing the entire altar to seem as if it had come alive, exuding a desolate aura. Jian Chen's eyes sharpened at this moment. He stared at the sky without blinking. Sacrificial divine beast. Tian Xingxian's voice rang out. The eyes of the Dark Star Emperor, who sat at the top of the divine hall, lit up. There was uncontainable excitement and eagerness in his eyes. He immediately waved his hand, and an item immediately flew out from the divine hall hidden in his sleeve, landing on the altar. Jianqin's mind began to ripple violently with the appearance of the item. His emotions fluctuated violently, and even his body clearly trembled. His presence became rather chaotic. This was because the item that had flown out from the divine hall was Siyu, the winged tiger of the Tianyuan continent, Siyu the Tiger Emperor. Siyu's condition was extremely miserable. He appeared before everyone in the form of a divine beast, but he was no longer as valiant as he had been in the past. This was because all of his vital energy had dried up. He had almost run out of vital energy. He was all skin and bones. He seemed like a dried corpse. Siyu was on the brink of death. He was on the verge of death. If it were not for the heavenly resources that the Dark Star Emperor had used to keep him alive, he probably would not have been able to last until now after so much inhumane torture. Siyu! Jianqin chanted inside. He slowly closed his eyes. Who knew if he could not bear to see Siyu in such a state, or if he wanted to hide the unconcealable, killing intent in his eyes. Dark Star race, I will definitely make you pay a heavy price. Jianqin's heart churned as he swore inside. Back on the Tianyuan continent, Siyu had only been born recently. They were already together before she had even opened her eyes. Afterwards, the two of them walked along the rugged path with firm steps. They grew up together and became stronger together. Along the way, they had experienced countless hardships and countless gruesome battles. They had gone through life and death together. His relationship with Siyu could not be understood by ordinary people. Divine beast blood. Tian Xingxian's voice rang out from the altar. The Dark Star Emperor waved his hand again, and over 100 droplets of essence blood immediately flew out. All of the essence blood came from Siyu, so it was equivalent to all the essence blood in Siyu's body. However, the essence blood no longer possessed Siyu's presence. All the essence blood had been changed, so they all possessed the presence of the Dark Star race. Draw upon the blood of all races. Tian Xingxian's voice became louder. With that, the Dark Star Emperor cut his finger first, and a droplet of his essence blood immediately drifted out. Every droplet of essence blood was connected to the very essence of a cultivator's life. It was the condensation of their vital energies, so it was extremely important to them. After losing this drop of essence blood, Dark Star Emperor's face clearly turned pale. Below, the 10 Hall Masters, Vice Hall Masters, and all the clansmen kneeling on the ground offered up a droplet of their essence blood as long as they were participating in the ritual, regardless of their strength. Jianqin was no exception. However, the essence blood he offered did not belong to him, but the real blood he had collected from Kuan Tian when he killed him. As a result, his essence blood gave off the pure presence of the Dark Star race without any flaws. All the essence blood slowly drifted into the sky under the guidance of an invisible force, where it fused with the essence blood that Siyu had transformed. In the end, the mass of essence blood became extremely large, forming a huge sphere of blood that was 3 meters in diameter. Tian Shangxian stood on the altar and formed a seal with his hand, triggering the invisible force on the altar. It formed a strange white flame that enveloped the mass of essence blood and then burned it fiercely. In the end, the huge mass of essence blood gathered by the numerous clansmen of the Dark Star race became smaller and smaller under the burning of the flames. However, as it shrank, its essence was clearly highly compressed as well, causing the level of the essence blood to rise at a visible rate.